Welcome. Tonight, our journey carries us across the vast, silent expanse of our own planet's oceans to places shielded by time and tide. We are traveling to the forgotten corners of the Earth, the small, isolated islands that float in the deep blue like punctuation marks in a long planetary sentence. If you have ever seen an ancient map, one drawn by cartographers who knew more of myth than of geography, you will recall the edges of the known world. In the vast, unexplored oceans, where the coastlines faded into imagination, the mapmakers would often write a simple, haunting phrase, "Hic sunt dracones," "Here be dragons." It was a warning, a confession of ignorance, a surrender to the unknown. But what if those mapmakers, in their fear, were accidentally right? What if these isolated places, these blank spots on the map, were truly home to creatures beyond their wildest comprehension? They were not perhaps the fire-breathing serpents of legend, but they were in their own way just as fantastic. These islands were never truly empty. They were lost laboratories, secret workshops where evolution, freed from the rigid rules of the continents, began to experiment. Here, in these quiet sanctuaries, the laws of nature were not broken, but they were bent in spectacular ways. Life arriving by chance, a seed clinging to a feathered breast, a desperate reptile clinging to a floating log, a spore carried on a high wind, found itself on a blank canvas. In this isolation, the great pressures of the mainland world simply vanished. There were no great predators stalking the shadows. There were no hordes of competitors fighting for every leaf and every ray of sun. There was only silence, opportunity, and time. And in that profound quiet, evolution began to dream. It took the small and made it mighty. It took the mighty and made it small. It crafted birds that forgot how to fly and reptiles that learned to rule. It created a world of giants from an ancestry of the meek. This is the great paradox of isolation. It is the story of how separation, how being cut off from the world, can become a crucible for creating the most unique and fragile forms of life imaginable. Tonight, we explore this paradox. We journey to these real-life lands of dragons. And so, it is time. Find that comfortable position. Let the weight of the day settle and then let it go. Dim the lights, put your phone on silent, and set aside the concerns of your waking world. Allow the noise of your mind to soften, to fade into the background. There is nothing for you to do now, nowhere for you to be, except here. Let your breath slow and feel your body grow heavy, anchored to the calm. Our journey tonight is one of wonder, not of worry. Let your mind drift, and let us ease together into the quiet current that will carry us to these forgotten shores. Our destination this evening is a strange and beautiful biological law known as the island rule. It is a riddle, a pattern that scientists only began to unravel in the last century. Why is it that on these isolated islands, the largest creatures in the world, like elephants, shrink down to the size of ponies, while at the same time, the smallest creatures, humble pigeons and rodents, grow to become fearless, lumbering giants? Tonight, we will walk with these giants. We will explore the forgotten worlds of the moa, the Haast's eagle, the dodo, and the elephant bird, creatures so strange they feel more like myth than biology. We will seek to understand the delicate mechanics of their creation and the tragic fragility that so often led to their disappearance. We are pulling back the veil on evolution's private experiments. We are entering the lost laboratories of the Earth. To understand the strange creatures that emerge from these lost laboratories, we must first pause. We must move past the simple, geographic definition of an island and truly explore the profound biological meaning of the force that defines them: isolation. What truly is an island? The dictionary provides a cold mechanical answer: a piece of land surrounded by water. This is a definition of geometry, of maps and coastlines. It tells us nothing of the deep evolutionary power of such a place. It tells us nothing of the silence, the solitude, or the immense biological pressure that this ring of water creates. For the story of life, an island is far more than just rock and soil emerging from the sea. It is, first, a fortress. The ocean that surrounds it is the ultimate gatekeeper, a vast, merciless, and impassive moat. This moat is wider and more effective than any wall ever built by human hands. It does not care if a creature is strong or fast or clever. It is a barrier of such immense scale that it renders the strengths of the mainland almost entirely irrelevant. The lion's power, the wolf's cunning, the deer's speed, all are meaningless at the edge of the surf. The ocean is an absolute filter. It holds the rules and the competitors of the continents in abeyance, creating a quiet space, a biological void. This void makes the island a sanctuary. For the few lucky voyagers who manage to cross that impossible moat, the seeds, the insects, the hardy reptiles, the island is a new beginning. It is a haven. It is a world without the crushing pressures of their former home. This is the ecological release we have spoken of, a liberation from the constant, grinding fear of predation, a release from the relentless competition that defined their ancestors for millions of years. This sanctuary is a blank canvas, a world of opportunity where the rules are reset and a new evolutionary story can begin. It is a world that whispers to the new arrivals, "You are safe here, you can change, you can become something new." But this is the paradox. This is the beautiful, terrible duality of isolation. The same walls that make the island a sanctuary also make it a prison. The fortress that keeps predators out also keeps the inhabitants in. Once a population is established, the moat that protected it now serves to trap it. The gene pool is sealed. There is no fresh genetic material arriving from the mainland, no new blood to refresh the lineage. The inhabitants are left to work only with the genetic toolkit they brought with them and the mutations that arise within their own limited numbers. They are marooned, not just in space, but in genetics. And this prison is a finite one. The sanctuary is a small one. Unlike the vast, seemingly endless resources of a continent, an island is a closed system. It is a finite larder. The amount of food, the amount of fresh water, the amount of space, it is all strictly limited. A drought on a continent might mean a difficult migration. A drought on an island means a potential apocalypse. There is nowhere to run. There is no escape. The walls of the prison are absolute. This, then, is the true meaning of an island. It is not just land surrounded by water. It is a biological pressure cooker, a place of intense and contradictory forces. It is a sanctuary of silence and a prison of limits. It is a fortress against the old rules and a crucible for new ones. This intense, focused pressure is what makes islands the engines of evolutionary strangeness. The inhabitants are forced to adapt, not to the wide, chaotic world of the continents, a world of a million different threats and opportunities, but to a very specific, very simplified, and very demanding set of local conditions. Isolation is the sculptor, the island is the stone, and the giants we are about to meet are the masterpieces, and sometimes the tragedies, carved by its slow, relentless, and unwavering hand. The laboratory is sealed. The great ocean moat defines the fortress, the sanctuary, and the prison. But a laboratory, no matter how perfect, remains empty until the first experiments are introduced. A stage, no matter how grand, is only a silent collection of wood and curtains until the first actor walks upon it. The story of how life reaches these remote pinpricks of land is perhaps the most dramatic, improbable, and tragic epic in all of biology. It is not a story of grand, heroic migrations. It is not a tale of conscious exploration or brave fleets setting sail for new worlds. It is a story of accidents. It is a story of tragedies, of tempests, of castaways, and of desperate billion-to-one lottery wins. The ocean is the great filter. It is an impassive gatekeeper that, by its very nature, forbids the vast majority of life from ever making the journey. The large mammals, the lions and the wolves, the elephants and the deer have no way to cross. The freshwater fish, the amphibians, the delicate flora of the mainland undergrowth, all are turned to dust or salt by the merest touch of the sea. Life can only cross this barrier by 3 methods, each one a testament to sheer, blind luck. The first is the voyage of the wind. Imagine a violent cyclonic storm, a hurricane of unimaginable power born off the coast of a great continent. It tears through the rainforests, a roaring, chaotic force, and in its grip, it snatches the dust of life. The microscopic spores of ferns and fungi, the lightweight seeds of orchids, the almost weightless silk threads of tiny ballooning spiders, all are lifted thousands of feet into the sky. There they are caught by the high-altitude jet streams, a river of wind that circles the planet. They become aerial plankton, silent, frozen voyagers in the upper atmosphere, traveling for weeks, for months, across entire oceans, far beyond the sight of the land they once knew. Most of this aerial dust falls into the sterile, unforgiving water. It is a rain of lost potential. But a few, a tiny infinitesimal fraction, will by chance be caught in a downdraft over a newly formed volcanic island. They will land on the warm, virgin soil. The storm also takes larger voyagers. A small bird, or perhaps a flock of finches, is ripped from its treetop home. They are carried 1,000 miles off course, battered by wind and rain, flying in a state of pure terror. They fly until their wings fail, until their bodies are screaming for rest, until they see nothing but an endless, angry horizon of blue. Most will fall, one by one, into that ocean. But one, just one with the last of its strength, might see the dark shadow of an island on the horizon. It is a pinprick of hope in an ocean of oblivion. It collapses onto a beach it has never seen, the sole survivor of its flock, the founder of a new dynasty. The second method of arrival is the great, slow voyage of the sea. Imagine a monsoon flood, a river on the continent swelling into a brown, churning monster. It rips a great mat of vegetation from its own delta, a tangled mass of trees, earth, and roots weighing hundreds of tons. This is not a log. It is a floating island, a dying makeshift ark. And on this ark are the unwilling passengers. Hidden in the crevices of the bark are insects, snails, the eggs of lizards. Perhaps a single terrified rodent clinging to a branch, soaked and freezing. This raft is washed out from the river delta and cast into the open ocean. It is now at the mercy of the currents. For months, this dying ark drifts. Its passengers bake in the equatorial sun. They are lashed by salt spray. They are starving, dying of thirst. The plants that make up their raft are slowly rotting, breaking apart. Millions of these arks sink, taking their desperate cargo down into the abyss. But one, just one, after a journey of 6 months, or perhaps a year, grounds itself on the reef of a remote island. The 2 or 3 lizards that survived the journey, their metabolisms slowed to near death, crawl onto the new land. They are the first of their kind. This is how the reptiles, the insects, and the small hardy mammals so often become the dominant land animals of isolated islands. They are not better swimmers. They are simply the ones who were small enough and tough enough to survive the long, horrific voyage on a floating raft. The arrivals are rare, they are fragile, and they are staggered. An island does not receive a new species every year. It might receive one every 10,000 years. This is the profound, defining silence of arrival. The laboratory is not flooded with life. It is seeded, one survivor at a time, across geological epochs. An actor arrives on the empty stage, and for centuries, they are alone. This is what creates the biological vacuum we will explore next. The stage is set, but the actors arrive tens of thousands of years apart, finding a world of profound, echoing silence. The journey is over. The impossible has happened. The small, storm-tossed bird, its feathers matted with salt, collapses onto the black sand of a volcanic beach. The lizard, a shriveled, near-death survivor, pulls itself from the rotting fibers of the mangrove raft that has been its prison for 6 months. They have arrived. They are the founders. And as they take their first steps into this new world, they are met with a silence far more profound than the one they left behind. It is not just the silence of wind and waves, or the gentle rustle of leaves in a forest that has never known an axe. It is a deep, deafening, biological silence. Imagine the lizard. For its entire evolutionary history, its life has been written in a language of fear. Its ancestors on the mainland lived in a world of constant, screaming noise, the shriek of a predatory bird above, the rustle of a snake in the leaves beside it, the scent of a carnivore on the wind. Every shadow was a threat, every open space a death sentence. Its instincts, carved over millions of years, are simple: hide, freeze, flee. It crawls into the new forest, its muscles tensed, its senses screaming, expecting the blow to fall at any second, and nothing happens. It waits. The sun warms its scales. No shadow passes overhead. It moves into a clearing. No predator bursts from the undergrowth. It finds a ripe, fallen fruit, a food source it has never seen, and it eats. It is not attacked. This is the biological vacuum. It is an absence so total, so absolute, that it is a physical presence. It is a world with the fear dial turned down to zero. The mainland these survivors left behind was a complex, brutal, and crowded tapestry. Every possible way of life, every niche was filled to bursting. The role of large herbivore was taken by deer and antelope. The role of small seed eater was contested by 1,000 species of mice, finches, and insects. The role of apex predator was held by the great cats and wolves. It was a complete ecosystem, a frantic, shoulder-to-shoulder battle for every calorie, every drop of water, every patch of sunlight. To survive there, you had to be a specialist. You had to be very, very good at one thing, and you had to do it while constantly looking over your shoulder. The island is the opposite. It is an empty stage. The biological roles are vacant. The ecological jobs are all unfilled. There is no apex predator. There is no large herbivore. There is no dominant, ground-dwelling browser. The small bird, which on the mainland might have spent its entire life in the high canopy, flitting from branch to branch, terrified of the ground, finds that the ground is safe. It finds that the forest floor is covered in a rich tapestry of fallen fruit, large seeds, and nutritious insects, a larder that no one else is exploiting. The job of a ground feeder is open. The small lizard finds that the job of eating leaves from the bushes, a role held by mammals on the continent, is also open. This is the profound gift of the biological vacuum. It is not just a release from fear, it is a release from competition. The new arrivals find themselves in a cafeteria with 1,000 empty tables, a library with 1,000,000 empty chairs. The pressure is no longer to fight for a resource. The pressure is simply to use it. This emptiness is a blank canvas. It is an invitation. Evolution, which on the mainland was a grim arms race, a desperate struggle for survival, now becomes something else entirely. It becomes a story of opportunity, of exploration, of potential. The new arrivals, this tiny marooned population of founders, are no longer bound by the ancient rules of their ancestors. The genetic toolkit that once coded for be small, be fast, be quiet, is suddenly obsolete. The individuals in this new population who are by chance a little bit bolder, a little bit larger, a little bit more curious, are no longer the first ones to be eaten. Instead, they are the first ones to thrive. The biological vacuum is the true engine of the island rule. It is the perfect, sterile, and silent laboratory in which evolution is about to begin its strangest and most creative work. The old world is gone, and its laws have vanished with it. The biological vacuum has been established. The empty stage is set, bathed in a profound and unfamiliar silence. The first actors, the storm-tossed bird, the shipwrecked lizard, have arrived, finding themselves liberated from the terror and competition of their ancestral home. It is in this moment, in this quiet, predator-free sanctuary, that the most critical event of all occurs. It is not a dramatic, thunderous event, but a subtle, internal, and final one. It is the moment the evolutionary clock is reset. On the mainland, the clock that governs life ticks at a frantic, relentless pace. It is the pulse of an arms race, a desperate, never-ending marathon. Generations tick by in a blur of predator and prey, of hunter and hunted. Evolution is a reactive force, a constant struggle to be faster, stronger, more venomous, or more perfectly camouflaged than the creature trying to eat you, or the creature you are trying to eat. The second hand of this clock is survival, and it moves with breathtaking, brutal speed. But the instant that founder population arrives on the island, that clock stops. The relentless ticking ceases. The arms race is over. The frantic pulse of the continent fades into a distant, irrelevant echo. And then, a new clock begins to tick. This new clock is wound by a different spring. It is powered not by fear, but by opportunity. It is driven not by competition, but by the unique, specific demands of the island itself. Its tempo is different. It is no longer a frantic race. It is a slow, methodical, experimental pulse, a deep, geological rhythm. There is no rush. There is only time. This is the Great Severing, the genetic link to the mainland. The great river of genes that flowed through the continental population has been cut. The island population is now an isolated genetic pond. This is what scientists call the founder effect. The few individuals who, by sheer chance, survived the impossible journey, that one bird, those two lizards, carry with them only a tiny, random fraction of the genetic diversity of their entire species. All the future generations that spring from them will be built only from that limited, accidental toolkit. Perhaps the mainland population had genes for a dozen different colors of feathers. But if the one bird that landed on the island happened to be brown, then for thousands of years, all the birds on that island will be brown. This is a profound moment. The story is starting over, not from a complete library, but from a single, water-damaged book. And this new story is written by a different set of pressures. The old pressures are gone. No lions, no wolves, no snakes. But new pressures, subtle and powerful, emerge from the island itself. Perhaps the fruit on this island's trees is larger and has a harder shell than the fruit on the mainland. The small, delicate beak of the ancestral bird is no longer efficient. In this new world, the birds in the population who, by random chance, are born with slightly thicker, stronger beaks are the ones who can eat more, survive better, and raise more young. The clock is now ticking, generation by generation, toward a larger, more powerful beak. Perhaps the leaves on the island plants are tougher, more fibrous. The lizards that, by chance, have slightly stronger jaws or a more efficient digestive system are the ones that thrive. The clock ticks toward a different kind of digestion, Even the absence of predators becomes its own kind of pressure. On the mainland, a bird that was born too bold, too curious, or too slow would be the first to be eaten. It would be an evolutionary dead end. Its genes would be removed from the population immediately. But on the island, this flaw is no longer a flaw. The bold bird, the one that is not afraid of the forest floor, is the one that finds the rich banquet of seeds and insects no one else is eating. Its boldness is rewarded. It thrives, it reproduces, and it passes on its genes for boldness. The clock is now ticking away from fear. It is ticking toward curiosity, toward size, toward a fearless exploration of the new world. This is the reset clock. Its direction is new. Its tempo is new. The island population has begun its long, slow drift. It is walking down a different evolutionary path from its cousins on the mainland. With every tick of this new, slow, methodical clock, it becomes a little stranger, a little more specialized, a little less like the ancestors it left behind. It is no longer just a finch. It is becoming, in the fullness of time, a new thing entirely. It is becoming an island finch, a creature perfectly and bizarrely adapted only to the silent, isolated world it now calls home. For millennia, these isolated laboratories, sealed by the ocean, operated in secret. The strange creatures they produced, the giant birds, the dwarf elephants, were known, if they were known at all, as mere curiosities. They were footnotes in the journals of sailors, or strange bones found by farmers, often mistaken for the remains of mythical cyclopes or dragons. They were seen as isolated oddities, nature's strange, one-off mistakes, not as pieces of a grand, interconnected puzzle. No one had yet zoomed out. No one had laid all the maps side by side and seen the hidden thread that connected these disparate, forgotten worlds. That is, until the 1960s, when a young Canadian ecologist named J. Bristol Foster began his work. Foster was not a man in search of a grand, revolutionary theory. He was a naturalist, a man of meticulous detail, a traveler and a cataloguer. He was a scientist doing the slow, essential and often unglamorous work of counting, measuring and comparing. His focus was on mammals, and his studies carried him across the globe, from the misty, rain-soaked islands of British Columbia to the sun-baked, rocky shores of the Mediterranean. His method was simple. He would travel to an island, and he would travel to the nearby mainland. He would trap and measure the rodents, the shrews, the rabbits. He would study the bones and the populations of the deer, and he would carefully note the differences. As he gathered this data, a strange and nagging pattern began to emerge. It was not a single blinding eureka moment. It was a slow, quiet recognition, the kind that comes to a scientist only after staring at spreadsheets and field notes for months. The numbers he was writing down simply did not make sense by the established rules of the mainland. He was seeing, in his data, a persistent contradiction. First, he looked at the large animals. He studied the bones of extinct dwarf elephants found on islands like Crete, Sicily, and Malta. These were unmistakable elephants, yet they were no larger than a modern pony, some barely the size of a large dog. He saw the same pattern in other large herbivores. The magnificent red deer of the European continent, when found on the island of Jersey, had shrunk to a fraction of its size. The hippos found on Mediterranean islands were dwarfs. The evidence was undeniable. When a large, magnificent creature, a giant of the continent, was marooned on an island, the reset clock seemed to tick in only one direction. It ticked toward smallness. This in itself was a fascinating curiosity, but it was only half of the riddle. Because when Foster looked at his data from the small animals, the evolutionary clock seemed to be running in the exact opposite direction. He looked at the humble dormouse, a tiny, nocturnal creature on the mainland of Italy. But on the islands of the Mediterranean, its bones showed it had grown to the size of a squirrel, or even a small rabbit. He saw the same trend in the Caribbean. The small, unassuming rodents known as hutias, which were modest in size on the continent, had evolved on the islands into giants, some weighing as much as 40 pounds. He saw it in his own work in British Columbia, where the island rodents were consistently, measurably larger than their mainland counterparts. The small, the frantic, the hunted, the creatures that lived in the shadows, when they were given a sanctuary, the clock ticked aggressively toward greatness. This was the paradox. This was the riddle that J. Bristol Foster had uncovered. Evolution was not moving in one direction. On these islands, it was pushing in both directions. At the same time, it was a strange, mirrored effect. The large became small, and the small became large. It was not random. It was a predictable, repeating pattern, a rule. Foster published his findings in the journal Nature in 1964. He had done more than just measure bones. He had synthesized the scattered anecdotal evidence from a century of natural history and identified the underlying mechanism. He had found the Rosetta Stone for these lost laboratories. He had given us the key to understanding why that reset clock ticked in such a strange and predictable way. This simple, profound observation, which would come to be known as the island rule, or Foster's rule, was the first great unifying theory of island biogeography. J. Bristol Foster's 1964 paper was more than just a collection of measurements. It was the articulation of this new law of nature. He had peered into the scattered, secret laboratories of the Earth and found the unifying equation that governed them all. This equation is the island rule, and at its heart, it is not just a rule, but a profound and beautiful biological dilemma. This equation is what we now call the island rule. And at its heart, it is not just a rule, but a profound and beautiful biological dilemma. The rule, in its elegant simplicity, states this: on the mainland, evolution has found a kind of balance. There is an optimal size for a deer. There is an optimal size for a mouse. These sizes are the result of millions of years of negotiation, a complex truce between the forces of predation, competition, climate, and food availability. A mouse that is too large is an easy target for a hawk. A deer that is too small is easily taken by a wolf. The mainland is a world of equilibrium, but the moment a species is stranded on an island, that equilibrium is shattered. The intricate web of rules is torn apart. The island rule is the description of what happens next. It is the story of evolution freed from its old anchors, being pulled by two new, powerful and opposing forces. It is a world turned upside down, a mirror world logic. The rule describes a dual-action force, a push and pull mechanism that operates in opposite directions at the same time, depending on where you start. First, it states that large animals, the giants of the continent, will inevitably begin to shrink. The evolutionary clock that, for millennia, pushed them toward size and strength is not just stopped, it is thrown violently into reverse. The continental giant, once a fortress of muscle and bone, becomes a liability in a world of limits. Second, the rule states that small animals, the humble and the hunted, will inevitably begin to grow. The evolutionary break line that kept them small, fast and fearful is cut. The clock that demanded they live in the shadows is reset, and it now ticks, generation by generation, toward boldness and size. This is the great paradox. The very same place, the very same forces of isolation will take a 6-ton elephant and, over the millennia, sculpt it down into a creature the size of a pony, while at the same time it will take a 6-ounce rodent and swell it into a giant the size of a beaver. This is the birth of the island rule. It is the recognition that an island is not just a place, but a process. It is an evolutionary engine that actively disassembles the forms created by the mainland and reassembles them into something new, something specialized for a world of quiet and limits. What Foster had defined was the central mystery. He had told us what happens. But the next, deeper question was why? Why does this mirrored logic take hold? The answer lies in the two great forces that define the biological vacuum of the island. The first force is the absence of the mainland pressures. The great predators are gone. The great competitors are gone. The logic of the arms race has vanished. This is what liberates the small. The second force is the presence of new, uniquely island pressures. The most significant of these is the finite pantry. The island is a closed system. The resources are limited. There is only so much food, only so much water. There is nowhere to run, nowhere to migrate. This is what puts the squeeze on the large. The island rule is the perfect, elegant outcome of these two new forces interacting. It is the logical, predictable result of life being poured into a new container. Before Foster, the dwarf elephant of Crete and the giant mouse of Malta were two separate, unrelated freaks of nature. After Foster, they were two sides of the same beautiful coin. They were the twin children of the same evolutionary law. He had given us the what. Now we must follow his map deeper into the why. We must first explore the sad, strange, and pragmatic logic of diminishment. Why, in a world without predators, the first thing a giant does is surrender its own greatness. To understand the first half of this great paradox, we must first picture the continental giant in its own world. Imagine a herd of woolly mammoths on the vast, frozen steppe of the Pleistocene, or a herd of 6-ton elephants moving through the heat of an African savanna. Their immense size is not an accident. It is not a vanity. It is a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering, a suit of armor forged over millions of years of relentless pressure. On the mainland, size is a solution. It is a solution to the problem of predation. A fully grown mammoth or elephant is a walking fortress. It is a mountain of muscle and bone that has virtually no natural enemies. A lion pack, a clan of hyenas, a saber-toothed cat, all will look upon this creature and decide to hunt something smaller, something weaker. Its sheer, breathtaking scale is its shield. It is also a solution to the problem of environment. A large body is a thermal furnace. It retains heat far more efficiently than a small one, a critical advantage in a freezing Ice Age tundra. In the baking heat of the savanna, its mass allows it to store water and resist the daily temperature swings. And it is a solution to the problem of competition. Its size allows it to fell trees, to push rivals away from a water source, to browse on high branches that no one else can reach. On the continent, to be big is to be dominant. To be big is to be safe. To be big is to win. Then the trap springs. A small pioneering herd, perhaps following a lush river delta, finds itself on a peninsula. Sea levels rise, the climate shifts, and the land bridge that connected them to their world is swallowed by the sea. They are now marooned. They have arrived in the isolated laboratory. And in this new world, every single advantage that their size gave them is not just neutralized. It becomes a fatal, crushing liability. The predators are gone. The lions, the tigers, the great cats, they did not make the journey. The magnificent suit of armor, the fortress of muscle that cost so much energy to build and maintain, is now defending against an enemy that no longer exists. It is a solution to a problem that has vanished. The finite pantry now becomes the only problem. An island is a closed system. There are no vast steppes, no endless savannas. The food supply is strictly, cruelly limited. A 6-ton elephant requires a staggering amount of fuel, 300, perhaps 400 pounds of vegetation every single day. On the continent, this is not a problem. A drought comes, the herd migrates 100 miles to a greener valley. But on the island, there is no migration. There is nowhere to run. There is only the food that grows within the confines of the shore, and that is all there will ever be. Now, picture the first lean season. A dry spell, a bad winter. The vegetation withers, the food supply dwindles. In this new evolutionary arena, who is the first to die? It is the largest, most magnificent individual, the one with the greatest appetite, the one whose massive body is a furnace that demands the most fuel. It is the first to starve. And who survives? It is the individual who, by sheer genetic chance, is slightly smaller, the one whose furnace runs a little cooler, whose body demands only 250 pounds of food instead of 300. It is the runt of the herd, the genetic variation that would have been a failure on the mainland, that is now, on the island, the champion of survival. This is the new selective pressure. It is a relentless, grinding force that favors not might, but efficiency. Generation after generation, this process repeats. The large starve, the small survive, the small pass on their genes for smallness. The evolutionary clock is now ticking backward. The giants, stripped of their purpose and betrayed by their appetites, are being sculpted down, generation by generation. This is not a sign of failure. It is not degeneration. It is a brilliant, pragmatic, and successful adaptation. It is life, in its infinite wisdom, surrendering its heavy crown in order to survive. This process is what gave us the dwarf mammoths of Wrangel Island, no larger than a modern-day cow, surviving thousands of years after their mainland cousins had vanished. It is what gave us the dwarf elephants of Crete and Sicily, creatures so small they could have walked through a modern doorway. The first half of the island rule is the story of this great surrender. It is the logic of efficiency, the triumph of the pragmatic. It is the story of how, in a world of limits, the first step to survival is to let go of the very greatness that once defined you. Now, we must look at the other side of the mirror. We have seen how the island, with its finite pantry, forces the great to surrender their crown. But this same laboratory, this same set of rules performs a miracle that is, in many ways, even more profound. It takes the small, the timid, the invisible, and it makes them giants. To understand this transformation, we must first, as we did with the elephant, picture the small creature on the continent. Imagine a humble field mouse, a shrew, or a finch. Its life is the polar opposite of the elephant's. The elephant's life is defined by its dominance. The mouse's life is defined entirely and absolutely by fear. On the mainland, the small animal is not a participant in the ecosystem. It is fuel. It is the currency of energy that pays for the lives of the predators. It is food for the owl, the snake, the fox, the weasel. Its entire evolutionary strategy is built around this single brutal fact. Its smallness is its only virtue. It is its shield, its invisibility cloak. It allows it to vanish into the grass, to disappear into a crack in the rock, to live a frantic life between the floorboards of the world. Its senses are not built for exploration. They are built for detection, tuned to the faintest snap of a twig or the whisper of a wing. Its metabolism is a frantic, high-speed engine, burning hot and fast. It lives fast, it reproduces fast, and it dies fast. It must make more of itself before it is inevitably eaten. This is its entire purpose: to be small, to be fast, to be fearful, and to reproduce before the shadow falls. Then the miracle happens. The lottery win. A pair of these mice, shipwrecked on a floating raft of vegetation, wash ashore. They crawl into the silent forest of the new island, trembling, every instinct screaming of the death that must be waiting for them. And the silence we spoke of continues. No owl hoots in the night, no snake slithers through the leaves. The biological vacuum is total. The glass ceiling of fear that has pressed down on their ancestors for 100 million years has just been shattered. This is the Great Liberation. In this new world, the evolutionary rulebook is not just rewritten, it is set on fire. Suddenly, the mouse's primary survival strategy, its smallness, is no longer an advantage. In fact, it becomes a disadvantage. Think of the lean season that so cruelly culled the giant elephants. That same winter, that same drought, now comes for the mice. A tiny body is a terrible furnace. It burns fuel at an incredible rate and has almost no capacity to store it. A small mouse can starve in a matter of days. A larger mouse, one with more body mass, can store more fat. It has reserves. It can survive the cold night. It can endure the week without food. On the mainland, a larger, fatter mouse would have been a slow, easy, high-value meal for a hawk. It would have been a genetic failure. On the island, it is a genetic champion. This is the new selective pressure. With the predators gone, the evolutionary brake line has been cut. The force that punished size has been removed, and a new force that rewards it has taken its place. The game is no longer hide and seek. The game is now compete and survive. In this new, safe world, the largest individuals in the population are the ones who win. The biggest mouse can push its siblings away from the best patch of berries. The biggest finch, its beak growing stronger, can crack the larger, tougher seeds that the others cannot. The bolder individual, the one not paralyzed by the ancestral fear, is the one who explores the forest floor and finds the rich, untouched larder of grubs and fallen fruit. This is the engine of gigantism. Generation after generation, the larger, bolder, and more efficient individuals are the ones who eat more, live longer, and have more offspring. The evolutionary clock is now ticking, relentlessly and aggressively, towards size. This is how the meek inherit the earth. This is how, on the islands of the Mediterranean, humble dormice evolved to be the size of rabbits. It is how, in the West Indies, unassuming rodents became 40-pound giants. This transformation is not just about getting bigger, it is about a change in role. The small, quivering creature that was once prey is now, in this new, empty world, free to become something new. It is free to become the island's dominant herbivore. It is free to take the vacant job of the deer, the badger, or the boar. It is free to become a giant. This is the second and most wondrous half of the island rule. We have now seen the two mirrored faces of the island rule. We have seen the logic that forces the mighty elephant to shrink, surrendering its greatness in a pragmatic bid for efficiency. And we have seen the logic that liberates the humble mouse, cutting its evolutionary brake lines and allowing it to swell into a fearless giant. It seems like a contradiction. How can the same place, the same force of isolation, produce two results that are the perfect opposite of one another? It is not a contradiction. It is two different answers to the exact same question. The question is, what happens when the ancient, defining rules of the mainland are suddenly, completely, and permanently removed? This process, this grand liberation, has a name. Scientists call it ecological release. It is perhaps the most powerful and creative concept in all of island biology. It is the why that sits behind both dwarfism and gigantism. It is the engine that drives the reset clock. Ecological release is, in its simplest terms, the liberation of a species from the limiting factors that defined it in its ancestral home. It is the sound of the chains breaking. On the mainland, every species is held in a complex, invisible prison of forces. These forces are the predators that hunt it, the competitors that fight it for food, and the parasites that infect it. Every creature has evolved to be a specialist, a master of surviving within the narrow confines of this prison. Then, the animal arrives on the island, and the prison doors vanish. Let us first consider the most powerful chain: predation. This is the force that kept the small small. For the field mouse, the predator was the glass ceiling that pressed down on its entire existence, the hawk from above, the snake from below. This pressure was so intense that it punished any deviation. A mouse born slightly larger or slightly bolder was simply a slower, more obvious, and more valuable meal. It was an evolutionary mistake, and it was corrected immediately. The ecological release from predation is profound. When the hawks and snakes are gone, that glass ceiling does not just crack, it shatters. The evolutionary punishment for being large is gone. For the first time in its history, the mouse is free to experiment with size. And as we saw, the island environment immediately begins to reward size, favoring the individuals who can store more fat and survive the lean seasons. The release is the permission to grow. The second part of the chain is competition. On the mainland, every ecological job is already taken. The role of large ground feeder is filled by deer or wild boar. The role of nutcracker is filled by squirrels. The role of leaf eater is filled by beavers or antelope. A small finch cannot simply decide to start eating large, tough nuts. There is already a species of growbeak or squirrel that is far better at it, and that finch would be outcompeted and starved. But on the island, the biological vacuum means all these jobs are open, the stage is empty. This is the second part of the ecological release. The mouse is released from its predator, the hawk, and it is also released from its competitors, the badger and the boar. The mouse is now free to apply for the vacant job of forest floor omnivore. The finch is free to apply for the vacant job of woodpecker. The pigeon is free to apply for the vacant job of ground-browsing herbivore. This release is what allows a small, unassuming ancestor to evolve over millennia into something completely new, filling a role its ancestors could have never dreamed of. Finally, we must ask, how does this apply to the elephant? How is a giant released? The elephant is released from the necessity of being a giant. Its size, its magnificent armor, was forged in the continental arms race. It was a metabolically expensive, fuel-guzzling defense against its predators, the great cats and saber-tooths. When the elephant is marooned on the island, it is released from this arms race. The enemy is gone. The war is over. It is now free to lay down its heavy, costly armor. This ecological release from predation allows the other, new pressure to become dominant, the finite pantry. Because it is no longer forced to be huge for defense, the elephant is now free to become small for efficiency. Ecological release is the great unlocking. It is the central mechanism of the island rule. It explains both sides of the paradox. It shatters the glass ceiling for the small, allowing them to rise, and it removes the armor from the large, allowing them to shrink. It is the quiet, permissive force that steps back and says to the new arrivals, "The old rules are gone, now show me what you can become." The theory of ecological release is a powerful and elegant concept. It provides a map, a set of guiding principles for understanding the strange logic of these isolated worlds. But to truly feel its power, to understand the sheer creative and transformative force of isolation, we must move from the abstract to the real. We must leave the world of theory and journey to the laboratory itself. And there is perhaps no island laboratory on Earth as perfect, as profound, or as isolated as the great two-island continent that we now call New Zealand. New Zealand is not just an island, it is the ultimate expression of the island concept. Its isolation is ancient, deep, and profound. Unlike volcanic islands like Hawaii or Galápagos, which are new landmasses pushed up from the ocean floor, New Zealand is an ancient traveler. It is a fragment of a lost world. It is a great silent ship of an island that some 80 million years ago broke away from the supercontinent of Gondwana. This timing is everything. 80 million years ago, the great age of mammals had not yet truly begun. The dinosaurs still ruled the Earth. When this great continental fragment snapped its final ties to Australia and Antarctica and began its lonely drift into the vast South Pacific, it carried with us a snapshot of life from that ancient pre-mammalian era. For 80 million years, New Zealand drifted in almost total solitude. It was a biological fortress sealed by thousands of miles of the world's most turbulent ocean. It was, in every sense of the word, a world apart. And what did this profound, ancient isolation create? It created the most perfect biological vacuum we have ever known. The great evolutionary story of the mammals, the story that was defining every other continent on Earth. The rise of the great cats, the thundering herds of herbivores, the clever primates, the burrowing rodents, all of it simply never happened here. For 80 million years, this land of mist and forest evolved in a world without the sound of a heavy paw print, without the growl of a predator in the night, without the nibbling teeth of a rodent, without the grazing mouth of a deer. The only mammals that ever made the impossible journey were a few species of bats carried on the high winds, and perhaps the ancestors of some marine mammals. But the land itself, the land was a kingdom of silence. This is ecological release in its most extreme and pure form. With the entire stage of a continent left vacant, with every single ecological job left unfilled, who was there to take the roles? The survivors of the great continental breakup, like the ancient Tuatara reptile, and most importantly, the voyagers of the wind, the birds. Birds, which on every other continent were masters of the sky, clinging to the high branches, their lives defined by a desperate airborne escape from the mammalian predators below. These birds arrived in New Zealand, and they found a paradise. They found a world with no snakes, no weasels, no foxes, no cats. They found a world where the ground was safe, and so the great liberation began. Flight, that metabolically expensive, energy-hungry miracle of motion, was suddenly no longer a necessity. It was a waste of energy. The evolutionary pressure that for millions of years had screamed, "Stay light, stay fast, stay in the air," was gone. A new pressure emerged, the pressure of the forest floor, a rich, untouched larder of berries, roots, insects, and lush vegetation with no one to eat it. Generation by generation, the birds came down from the sky. Their wings, no longer needed for escape, began to shrink. Their keel bones, the great anchor for flight muscles, diminished. Their bodies, no longer needing to be lightweight, grew heavy, strong, and robust. Their legs became thick and powerful. This is the story of New Zealand. It is the story of an evolutionary event so profound it is almost unique. It is the story of how an entire class of animals, the birds, stepped down from their aerial niche and took over all the vacant jobs of the mammals. They became the mice of the forest floor. They became the deer of the high canopy. They became the badgers of the undergrowth. This was not a land of mammals. This was the Republic of Birds. And in this republic, in this predator-free, isolated laboratory, the reset clock began to tick, pushing the boundaries of what a bird could be towards sizes and forms that the rest of the world had never, ever seen. In this silent Republic of Birds, this ancient, isolated laboratory of New Zealand, the evolutionary stage was set. The birds had come down from the sky, liberated by the absence of predators, and were now free to explore the vacant roles of the land. And the most prominent, most vital role left empty was that of the large herbivore. On every other continent, this was the job of the deer, the antelope, the bison, the elephant. It was the role of the great browser and grazer, the animal that roamed the land in herds, shaping the very landscape by its appetite. In New Zealand, this job was taken by a bird, and in taking this role, it became a creature of almost mythical proportions. It became the moa. The moa were not a single species, but a diverse family, an entire dynasty of 9 distinct species that had evolved to fill every browsing niche. There were smaller, turkey-sized moa that moved through the dense undergrowth, and medium-sized moa that browsed the shrubs. But then there was the giant, the South Island giant moa, Dinornis robustus. We must pause here and try to truly picture this creature. It is a challenge for our modern mammal-trained minds. This was a bird that stood 12 feet tall, its head reaching high into the lower canopy of the forest. It was a living tower of shaggy, hair-like feathers, weighing over 500 pounds. Its legs were not the slender, delicate legs of an ostrich or an emu. They were massive, powerful columns of bone and muscle, thick and scaled, built to carry its immense weight over the forest floor. It had no wings, not even the tiny, vestigial nubs of a kiwi. After 80 million years of perfect, uninterrupted safety, its wings had vanished entirely, leaving not even a trace on its skeleton. This was the cow of New Zealand. This was its giraffe. To walk through the ancient forests of pre-human New Zealand would have been to walk through a fairy tale. You would not hear the snap of a twig under a heavy hoof. You would hear the slow, methodical tread of a 3-toed scaled foot pressing into the damp fern. You would see, not a herd of deer moving through the trees, but a family group of these towering, headless-seeming giants, their long, powerful necks stretching up, their beaks systematically, peacefully, stripping leaves from the branches. Their presence shaped the very forests they lived in. For millions of years, the plants of New Zealand evolved in response to this one dominant browser. Many of the native shrubs developed a strange, tangled and divaricating growth pattern, a dense, chaotic mesh of tough, interlaced branches. It is a botanical armor, a defense evolved not against the nibbling lips of a deer, but against the powerful, ripping beak of the moa. For millennia, the moa lived in a state of grace. It was a giant with no enemies. It was a creature of immense size and power that had never, in its entire evolutionary history, had to run for its life. It was a gentle, slow-moving, peaceful browser in a land that had forgotten the very concept of fear. It was the ultimate expression of ecological release. An unassuming flying ancestor stranded in paradise had been given the vacant job of mega herbivore, and it had stepped into that role with spectacular success, becoming the largest bird of its time, a true master of its domain. This giant, this peaceful monarch of the forest, was the stable center of the New Zealand ecosystem. It was the great, slow pulse of the land, converting plant matter into life, trimming the forests and treading the ancient paths. But the island rule, as we have seen, is an engine of balance. It is a story of niches and the filling of those niches. And when evolution, in its patient, methodical way, creates a 500-pound, slow-moving, defenseless source of protein, it is only a matter of time before it creates something to hunt it. The vacant job of apex predator was still open, and in New Zealand, the creature that applied for that job was not a great cat or a wolf. It was another bird. It was a predator that would evolve to become the moa's perfect and most terrifying shadow. The ancient misty forests of New Zealand had found their great herbivore. The moa, a 12-foot wingless giant, moved through the ferns in peaceful, unbothered herds. For millions of years, this creature had lived in a world without fear, a perfect expression of ecological release. But the island rule is a relentless engine of balance. A biological vacuum had been filled, the role of the large browser. But this very success created a new and spectacular vacancy. It created the job of the moa hunter. The island laboratory, having crafted a 500-pound, slow-moving, defenseless source of protein, was now presented with a new evolutionary question: who will come to eat it? On the continents, this role was filled by the great cats, the wolves, the pack-hunting carnivores. But in New Zealand, the fortress of isolation held them all at bay. The land was empty of mammalian predators. The only creature that could fill this niche would have to be one that could, at some point, cross the vast ocean moat. It would have to be a voyager of the wind. At some point, perhaps millions of years after the moa's ancestors had arrived, another storm-tossed traveller was blown onto New Zealand's shores. It was a bird. But this was not a peaceful herbivore. It was a predator. It was a small, perhaps wedge-tailed eagle, an ancestor from Australia, a creature of modest size, built to hunt small mammals or birds. It arrived in its new home, and it found a biological impossibility. It found a world with no small mammals to hunt. But it found a forest floor teeming with giant, flightless, and utterly fearless birds. The evolutionary pressure was immediate and absolute. The small eagles that tried to hunt small prey starved. The eagles that, by sheer chance, were slightly larger, slightly stronger, and bold enough to attack a young moa were the ones that survived. The evolutionary clock reset. The brake lines were cut. The force that had kept the eagle small, the limited size of its prey, was gone. In its place was a new, incredible, and seemingly limitless food source: the moa. The evolutionary clock was now ticking aggressively toward gigantism. This was not just a simple increase in size. This was an arms race, but an arms race between two birds in a world without mammals. Over the millennia, this modest eagle was sculpted by its prey. It grew into a creature of terrifying power and proportions, a bird that seems more like a monster from a dark fantasy than a biological reality. This was the Haast's eagle. It was the largest eagle the world has ever known. It was a feathered hunter weighing up to 35 pounds, with a wingspan that could stretch to 10 feet. But its wings were relatively short for its body size, a feature seen in forest hunters that need to maneuver at speed through dense trees. Its true weapons, however, were its feet. Its talons were the size of a modern tiger's claws, 3 to 4 inches long, sharp as daggers, and attached to feet and legs of immense, crushing power. This was not a predator built to snatch rabbits. This was a predator built to kill giants. Its skeleton tells the story of its life. It would perch high in the forest canopy, a silent 35-pound shadow watching the herds of moa move below. And when it spotted its target, perhaps a young or unwary individual, it would launch into a dive. It would strike the moa at speeds estimated to be over 50 miles per hour. The force of the impact alone was enough, scientists believe, to break the moa's pelvis or back. This was not a delicate hunt. This was an aerial assassination. The eagle would use its immense talons to grip the giant bird, holding on as the moa thrashed, using its powerful beak to tear at the kill. This was the balance that New Zealand had found. An isolated laboratory, free of mammals, had created its own lion. It had taken a bird, and through the pressure of ecological release and the opportunity of a vacant niche, it had forged a feathered apex predator, a shadow in the sky built for the sole purpose of hunting a 12-foot giant. The story of New Zealand, with its wingless moa and its tiger-taloned eagle, is a perfect, almost pure illustration of the island rule. It is what happens when the evolutionary clock is reset in a laboratory almost entirely devoid of mammalian influence. It is a world that feels like a beautiful alien anomaly, a republic of birds. But the genius of J. Bristol Foster's observation was not that this happened once, it was that this was a rule. It was a predictable pattern, a set of evolutionary laws that would apply themselves again and again in any laboratory where the conditions of isolation were met. To see this rule in action, to hear its echo, we must leave the misty forests of the South Pacific. Our journey now takes us west, across the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean, to another great island, another ancient continental fragment that broke away from the supercontinents of the past. We are traveling to Madagascar. Madagascar is, in many ways, a sister experiment to New Zealand. It, too, is a land of profound, ancient isolation. It snapped its final ties to the African continent more than 150 million years ago and has drifted in solitude ever since. Like New Zealand, it was an ark, but it was an ark that carried a different and perhaps slightly more diverse set of founding passengers. Its separation from Africa occurred before the great rise of the mammals that would come to dominate the mainland. There were no lions, no giraffes, no elephants, no great apes. But unlike New Zealand, it appears some small primitive mammals did make the impossible journey, perhaps on those desperate floating rafts. The ancestors of the lemurs, the tenrecs, and the strange mongoose-like euplerids arrived in this new, empty world. They had found a biological vacuum, and so, just as in New Zealand, the great liberation of ecological release began. The few lucky survivors found themselves on an empty stage, free from their mainland competitors and predators, and they exploded into a spectacular array of new forms. The lemurs, from a single small nocturnal ancestor, evolved into over 100 different species. They filled the vacant jobs. Some became like monkeys, leaping through the high canopy. Some became like anteaters, and some, in the absence of large herbivores, became giants. There were sloth lemurs, great slow-moving creatures the size of gorillas, hanging from the branches. There was Megalodapis, a koala lemur the size of a modern man. Madagascar was a laboratory where the mammals, given the chance, had claimed the island. But they were not alone. Just as in New Zealand, this laboratory was also open to the voyagers of the wind. Birds, arriving on the storm, also found this predator-free paradise. And just as they had on the other side of the world, they found that the ground was safe. The glass ceiling of fear was gone. And so, the very same evolutionary story that played out in New Zealand began to play out here, in a beautiful parallel. The birds came down from the sky. Their wings, no longer needed for a desperate escape from mammalian hunters, began to shrink. Their bodies, no longer bound by the severe weight limits of flight, began to swell. The reset clock was ticking. The island rule was asserting its power, echoing the same logic it had used to create the moa. Madagascar, too, became a land of giant, flightless birds, but this time, the evolutionary path it took was different. New Zealand's isolation, its complete lack of land predators, had sculpted the moa into a tall, relatively graceful, giraffe-like browser. Madagascar was a different environment. It had its own strange native predators, the cat-like fossa and perhaps even large extinct crocodiles. The vacant niche here was not just tall browser. The great opportunity, it seems, was to become a creature of immense, unassailable mass. And so, the unassuming flying ancestor that landed here was sculpted by evolution into a different kind of monster. It was not a tower. It was a fortress. It was a creature that, in its sheer, ponderous bulk, would become the heaviest bird the world has ever known. The laboratory of Madagascar was about to create its own masterpiece. It was about to create the elephant bird. The laboratory of Madagascar, running its own parallel experiment to New Zealand, had followed the island rule to its logical, magnificent conclusion. In a world free from the great predators of the mainland, the birds had come down from the sky. The evolutionary brake lines were cut, and the clock was ticking toward gigantism. But while the moa of New Zealand had evolved for height, becoming a 12-foot tower, the giant of Madagascar evolved for mass. The result was Epiornis maximus, the elephant bird. This is a creature that pushes the very boundaries of what is biologically possible for a bird, a creature that redefines our understanding of avian life. Its name, given by those who found its colossal bones, is not an exaggeration. This was a bird, but it was a bird on the scale of an elephant. It stood perhaps not as tall as the very tallest moa, reaching a still terrifying height of around 10 feet or 3 meters. But it was not a creature of graceful height. It was a creature of breathtaking, ponderous bulk. Estimates of its weight vary, but the most conservative numbers are staggering. It weighed on average around 500 kilograms or 1,100 pounds. The largest individuals, it is believed, could have approached 700 or even 800 kilograms. That is nearly 2,000 pounds. It was, without question, the heaviest bird that has ever walked the earth. We must try to visualize what this means. This was not a fast, nimble ostrich. This was a walking, feathered tank, a living, breathing behemoth. Its legs were not slender stilts. They were massive, pillar-like columns of bone, thicker and more robust than those of any moa, designed to support the immense, crushing gravity of its body. Like the moa, it was utterly wingless. It was a creature so heavy, so dense, that the very concept of flight was a distant genetic memory, an echo from a small flying ancestor millions of years in its past. It moved through the spiny forests and scrublands of southern Madagascar, an unstoppable, slow-moving force of nature. It was the island's ultimate herbivore. While the giant lemurs may have dominated the trees, the elephant bird was the undisputed master of the ground. It was a browser and a grazer, its powerful, broad beak ripping up vegetation, consuming fruits and seeds. It was, in essence, Madagascar's version of a rhinoceros or a small elephant. It was the mega-herbivore niche, filled not by a mammal, but by a bird that had, through the miracle of ecological release, become a biological fortress. It is likely that it had almost no enemies. The island's native predators, like the cat-like fossa or the extinct giant crocodiles, would have posed a threat to its young, or perhaps a sick individual. But a healthy adult elephant bird at nearly a ton in weight was, like the continental elephant, simply unassailable. It was a mountain of muscle and feathers. The true testament to its scale, however, was not just its body, it was its young. The elephant bird laid the largest eggs of any animal in the history of life, larger even than those of the greatest dinosaurs. Its eggs were colossal, oval structures, often over a foot long and nearly 3 feet in circumference. They were pale, thick-shelled, and possessed a liquid volume of over 2 gallons. A single elephant bird egg was the equivalent of nearly 180 modern chicken eggs, or a dozen emu eggs. To hold one of these fossilized shells in your hands is to hold the largest single cell that our planet has ever produced. This egg is the perfect symbol of the island rule. It is the ultimate expression of the K strategy of island life, the strategy of living slow, dying old, and investing heavily in a few precious offspring. This was not a creature that laid a dozen small eggs and hoped for the best. This was a giant that invested all its energy into creating one perfect, enormous vessel of life. For millennia, the elephant bird was the great, slow pulse of Madagascar, a quiet, feathered giant that embodied the island's unique evolutionary story. Like the moa, it was a masterpiece of gigantism, a testament to what life can become when the rules of the mainland are broken. But the island rule has another, more intimate and perhaps more famous face. Not all islands are vast continental fragments like New Zealand or Madagascar. Some are tiny volcanic pinpricks in the ocean. And on these smaller stages, the rule created perhaps its most curious, most melancholic, and most iconic giant of all. We have walked with the giants of the great ancient laboratories. We have seen the towering 12-foot moa of New Zealand, a creature that emerged from 80 million years of perfect, mammal-free isolation. We have stood in the shadow of the elephant bird, the 1,000-kilo feathered fortress of Madagascar, the heaviest bird that has ever lived. These were the masterpieces of the super labs, the great continental fragments. But as we ended our last chapter, we noted that the island rule has another, more intimate and perhaps more famous face. The rule does not only apply to vast land masses, its logic is just as powerful, and perhaps even more concentrated, on the small volcanic pinpricks that rise from the ocean floor. Our journey now takes us away from the ancient arcs to a newer, smaller, and perhaps more tragic stage. We are traveling east of Madagascar to the Mascarene Islands, a small archipelago of volcanic peaks. We are landing on the shore of one, in particular Mauritius. This too was a perfect laboratory. A tiny, isolated world of lush forests, steep valleys, and abundant fruit. And like our previous examples, it was a biological vacuum. It was a paradise with no native land mammals and, crucially, no ground predators. And so, the stage was set for the same story to unfold. At some point, long before human history, a voyager of the wind arrived. It was not a great eagle, nor a creature of immense potential. It was something far more common, something we see in every city park on Earth. It was a flock of pigeons. Most likely, it was the ancestor of the modern Nicobar pigeon, a beautiful iridescent bird blown violently off course in a tropical cyclone. They arrived on the shores of Mauritius, the lucky, exhausted survivors of a terrible storm, and they found paradise. They found a world where the ground was safe. The glass ceiling of fear was gone. They found a forest floor littered with an endless banquet of large fallen fruits. The same evolutionary clock that had reset for the moa now reset for this humble pigeon. Flight, the pigeon's defining skill, the frantic wing-beating escape from the hawks and cats of the mainland, was now a pointless waste of energy. The evolutionary pressure to stay light vanished. A new pressure emerged, the pressure to use the abundant, calorie-rich fruit on the forest floor. The pigeons came down from the trees. Generation by generation, the wings weakened, the legs thickened. The body, no longer needing to be aerodynamic, began to swell. The delicate, seed-pecking beak was useless against the large, tough-skinned fruits of the island. It began to thicken, to lengthen, to curve, developing a powerful, hooked tip, a tool for ripping and tearing flesh from fruit. The small, frantic, agile pigeon was being disassembled piece by piece and rebuilt by the island rule. It was being sculpted into the vacant role of large, ground-dwelling fruit-eater. The result, after millennia of this gentle, predator-free pressure, was the dodo. We must erase from our minds the cartoonish, clumsy image from popular culture. The dodo was not a failed creature. It was an evolutionary masterpiece. It was a creature perfectly adapted to its environment. It was a giant, weighing perhaps 40 or 50 pounds, the size of a large turkey. It was utterly flightless, its wings reduced to tiny, useless tufts of feathers. It was a lumbering, robust bird, built not for speed, but for efficiency. It waddled through the forests in small family groups, its great, hooked beak tearing at the seasonal bounty of fruit. It was, in essence, a 50-pound, flightless pigeon. But the isolation of Mauritius did something more than just change its body. It changed its mind. The dodo evolved in a world that had forgotten malice. It had no predators, and so over the millennia it lost the very concept of fear. The instinct to flee, the frantic panic of its ancestors, was bred out of it. It was replaced by a gentle, simple and, as it would turn to be, tragic curiosity. This was the evolutionary naivete we spoke of earlier. The dodo was a creature of profound innocence. It was a giant, sculpted by paradise, living a slow, simple life. It was the most iconic, the most curious, and the most heartbreakingly specialized of all the island giants. It was a creature built for a world that was gentle, predictable, and safe. It was perfectly adapted. Until, that is, the laboratory was broken open, and the old, forgotten rules of the mainland came rushing in. The story of the dodo is a quiet tragedy. It is the story of a creature sculpted by a world without malice, a 50-pound flightless pigeon that had lost the very concept of fear. It was a masterpiece of evolutionary naivete, a giant of perfect innocence. But not all island laboratories are gentle. Not all are perfect biological vacuums. The island rule is not a single simple story. It is a law of adaptation, and sometimes the vacant niche that needs to be filled is not that of the peaceful herbivore. Sometimes the vacant job is that of the dragon. Our journey now takes us west into the Indonesian archipelago, to a cluster of rugged volcanic islands. We are in the Lesser Sunda chain, on the island of Flores, and the small islands that surround it, including Komodo. This, too, is an isolated laboratory, but it is a different kind of laboratory. It is not the ancient mammal-free sanctuary of New Zealand, nor the predator-free paradise of Mauritius. This was a laboratory that was, for millions of years, home to its own unique and scaled-down megafauna. This was a land of dwarf elephants. The same island rule that forced the great mammoths of the Mediterranean to shrink had been at work here. The ancestors of mainland elephants, stegodon, had arrived on Flores, and in that finite pantry, they had been sculpted down into a creature no larger than a modern water buffalo. For millennia, this dwarf giant roamed the island forests, and this presented a new evolutionary question. The island had its herbivore. Who would evolve to hunt it? The mainland predators, the great cats, were absent. The niche of apex predator was, just as it had been in New Zealand, empty. And just as in New Zealand, the creature that stepped up to claim this vacant, bloody throne was not a mammal, it was a reptile. The ancestor of the Komodo dragon, a smaller monitor lizard, arrived on these shores, likely swimming the short inter-island channels. It arrived, and it found a biological vacuum waiting for it. It found a larder filled with dwarf elephants, a food source far larger than anything its ancestors had ever tackled. The evolutionary pressure was immense. The small lizards that fed on insects and small prey survived. But the lizards that, by random chance, were slightly larger, slightly stronger, and capable of taking down a young stegodon were the ones that feasted. They were the ones that thrived. The glass ceiling was shattered. The reset clock was ticking. The humble monitor lizard was being forged, generation by generation, into a giant. The result is Varanus komodoensis, the Komodo dragon. This is not a gentle giant like the dodo. It is not a creature of naivete. It is a 10-foot, 300-pound armored carnivore. It is a living, breathing testament to the fact that the island rule can also create monsters. The Komodo dragon is the apex predator of its island. It is a giant that evolved to hunt other island giants. Its biology is a masterpiece of reptilian terror. It does not hunt with the quick canine efficiency of a wolf or the strangling power of a great cat. It hunts with patience, and it kills with chemistry. It is a slow-moving, silent stalker, its grey, armoured scale body blending perfectly with the dry forest floor and volcanic rock. It will wait, motionless, for hours, its forked yellow tongue tasting the air, reading the chemical signatures of the world, a sense of smell so profound it is almost a form of sight. When its prey, a deer, a wild boar, or in ancient times a dwarf elephant, passes by, the attack is a sudden, explosive lunge. It does not need to win a battle of strength. It only needs to land a single, glancing bite, because its mouth is a biological arsenal. Its serrated, shark-like teeth are designed to slice flesh, but its true weapon is a sophisticated cocktail of venom, a complex brew of toxins delivered from glands in its lower jaw. This venom is not a fast-acting neurotoxin. It is a slow, methodical destroyer. It is an anticoagulant, preventing the blood from clotting. It is a vasodilator, causing the blood vessels to open wide. The dragon bites, and then it simply retreats. It lets the island and its own chemistry do the work. The wounded animal stumbles away, but it is already dying. It is bleeding, and it cannot stop. Its blood pressure is plummeting, sending it into a state of profound shock, and the dragon follows, patiently, relentlessly. Its forked tongue tastes the air, following the scent of the blood and the growing panic of its victim, sometimes for miles, sometimes for days. It is a slow, inexorable, reptilian shadow, a dragon of terrible patience, waiting for its dying prey to finally fall. This is what the island rule created on Flores. It is not the gentle, feathered giant of New Zealand. It is a 300-pound venomous lizard, a creature that became a giant to fill the role of the lion, a true and living dragon. We have stood in the shadow of the feathered giants, the moa and the elephant bird, creatures that swelled to fill the vacant role of large herbivore in a world of silence. We have just left the volcanic shores of Komodo, home to a 300-pound venomous lizard, a dragon that became a giant to fill the vacant role of apex predator. These are giants of action. The moa, a giant of peaceful browsing. The Komodo, a giant of patient, terrifying malice. But the laboratories of the island rule are endlessly creative. The vacant niche of large herbivore does not always have to be filled by a fast-growing, warm-blooded creature. There is another path to dominance, a slower, more patient, and perhaps more ancient path. Our journey now takes us to two of the most famous laboratories on Earth. We travel to the rocky volcanic archipelago of the Galápagos off the coast of South America and to the remote coral atoll of Aldabra in the Indian Ocean. These islands are, once again, perfect biological vacuums. They are harsh, isolated, and, crucially, free of any large native land predators. And when the ancestor of the tortoise arrived, likely a small mainland species washed out to sea in a storm, clinging to a raft of vegetation, it found a world of opportunity. The job of large herbivore was open, but the tortoise is not a bird. It is not a mammal. It is a reptile. It is a cold-blooded creature, its internal furnace running not hot and fast, but cool and slow. It cannot run. It cannot leap. It cannot fly. Its entire evolutionary toolkit is contained in one magnificent defining feature: its shell. On the mainland, this shell was a defense, but a limited one. A small tortoise is still vulnerable to a powerful predator like a jaguar or a large crocodile, which can crush its shell. Its best defense was to be small, to hide. But on the island, the predators were gone. The glass ceiling of fear was shattered, and so the reset clock began to tick. In this new, safe world, the evolutionary pressure changed. The game was no longer hide. The game was eat. The tortoises, like the dodo and the moa, came out into the open, and the island rule began to work its magic. The individuals who, by chance, were slightly larger, could eat more of the tough vegetation. But more importantly, a larger body meant a larger shell. And on an island with no shell-crushing predators, a large shell is the ultimate defense. It is not just armor. It is an impenetrable fortress. A giant tortoise is a creature that has evolved to be its own, walking, impregnable castle. But the true genius of its gigantism is not just defense, it is efficiency. This is where the cold-blooded nature of the reptile becomes a superpower. A warm-blooded giant, like the moa, needs a constant massive supply of fuel to keep its furnace burning. The tortoise's furnace, by contrast, barely smoulders. Its metabolism is a slow, methodical, meditative pulse. It is the most fuel-efficient large animal imaginable. This makes it the perfect island inhabitant. The island is a finite pantry, a world of boom and bust, of long, brutal dry seasons where the vegetation withers and dies. The warm-blooded giants would starve. The giant tortoise simply waits. Its great size is not just a shield, it is a battery. It is a vast, living larder. In its massive body, it stores immense reserves of fat. It stores vast quantities of water. When the dry season comes and the island turns to dust, the giant tortoise does not panic. It does not need to migrate. It simply stops. It pulls its head into its fortress of bone, and it waits, living for months perhaps, it is believed, for up to a year on its own internal reserves. It has become a giant, not through speed or power, but through patience and endurance. This is the island rule at its most pragmatic. It has taken a small, vulnerable reptile and transformed it into a 500-pound walking, living castle, a creature that has mastered the art of survival by mastering the art of doing nothing. To see one is to see a creature that operates on a different time scale. They are the true, slow heart of the island. They move through the landscape like geologic features. Their slow, relentless grazing creating pathways, shaping the vegetation, the tortoise meadows that other creatures depend on. They are the ultimate expression of the K strategy that the elephant bird egg represented. They live slow, they grow slow, and they live for an impossibly long time, a century and a half. They are the reset clock, made manifest. They are the quiet, meditative giants, born not of power, but of an unbreachable defense and an infinite, profound patience. We have walked with the great icons of the island rule. We have seen the towering feathered monarchs of New Zealand and Madagascar. We have stood in the shadow of venomous dragons and living, breathing, reptilian castles. These are the megafauna, the great charismatic giants that capture our imagination, the obvious masterpieces of the isolated laboratories. But the island rule is far more subtle and far more pervasive than this. It is a fundamental law of evolutionary physics. It is a pressure that applies itself not just to the large and the obvious, but to all life at all scales. The biological vacuum of an island is not just the absence of lions, wolves, and hawks. In many of these laboratories, especially in places like New Zealand, the vacuum was even more profound. It was a world without the small, scuttling, nocturnal predators. It was a world without rats, without shrews, without weasels, without mice. On the mainland, these small mammals are a relentless, scouring force. They are the dominant rulers of the forest floor, a carpet of warm-blooded, high-metabolism hunters that devour grubs, seeds, eggs, and, above all, insects. For an insect on the continent, the mouse is the glass ceiling. It is the predator that keeps them small, that keeps them hidden, that forces them into a life of frantic, fast-breeding invisibility. So what happens when the voyagers of the wind, the tiny insects, arrive on an island and find that this mouse predator is gone? What happens when an insect arrives in a biological vacuum where the job of the mouse is left wide open? The answer, once again, is ecological release. The island rule, in its perfect mirrored logic, takes the insect and it begins to transform it into a mouse. We return to New Zealand, the land of birds. Here, the absence of mammals was total. An ancestor of a cricket, perhaps a small jumping insect, arrived and found a paradise. The ground was safe. The nights were quiet. And the job of small nocturnal ground-dwelling omnivore, the role of a mouse, was vacant. The evolutionary clock reset. The selective pressure was no longer to be small and fast. The new pressure was to be large, robust and efficient, to be able to eat a wider range of food, from leaves to seeds to fungi to other insects, to be able to store more fat. Generation by generation, the humble cricket ancestor was sculpted by the island rule. It became the giant waiter. The waiter is a creature that seems to defy logic. It is an insect, but it is an insect on a mammalian scale. It is a wingless, heavily armored, tank-like creature, a behemoth of the insect world. The largest of them can weigh over 70 grams. That is heavier than a modern house mouse, heavier even than a sparrow. It is one of the heaviest insects on Earth. It is a slow-moving nocturnal browser, a perfect living example of an insect that has become a mouse. It is shy, it lives a long time, and it browses on the forest floor, filling the very role that, on every other continent, is held by a rodent. It is a little giant, a testament to the fact that the island rule will find a way to fill every vacant niche, even if it has to use the most unlikely of materials. And this pattern repeats. On Lord Howe Island, a tiny, remote volcanic speck in the Pacific, another insect ancestor arrived. This time, it was a stick insect. On the mainland, a stick insect is a masterpiece of camouflage. It is a wisp, a twig, a creature that survives by not being seen. But on Lord Howe Island, the predators that hunted it were absent. The job of nocturnal leaf eater was open. The stick insect, released from the pressure to be invisible, began to change. It did not just get longer, it got heavier, it became robust, it surrendered its delicate twig-like camouflage and instead evolved to be a 6-inch-long glossy black, heavily armored creature. It became so large, so substantial, that the sailors who first found it did not call it a stick insect. They called it the tree lobster. It is a slow, heavy-bodied giant, another insect filling a niche left empty by the absence of mammals. The island rule, we see, is a universal force. It does not just build giants from pigeons and dwarfs from elephants. It can take the tiniest, most humble cricket, the most invisible wisp of a stick, and in the profound, patient silence of the laboratory, it can transform them into giants in their own right. It proves that no job, no matter how small, is left vacant for long. We have now completed our tour of the lost laboratories. We have walked through the gallery of giants, and the sheer creative force of the island rule is no longer an abstract theory. We have seen its echoes in the parallel, feathered monarchies of New Zealand and Madagascar, giving rise to the moa and the elephant bird. We have felt its melancholic power in the creation of the dodo, a 50-pound pigeon of perfect innocence. We have seen its terrifying reptilian face in the venomous komodo dragon, and its patient ancient heart in the 500-pound giant tortoise. We have even seen its subtle pervasive logic at work on the smallest of scales, transforming a humble cricket into the giant mouse-like waiter. The what is now clear. The islands produced giants. But now our journey must turn. We must move from the gallery of creatures to the gallery of causes. We must ask the most important question: why? What exactly is the mechanism? What is the unseen evolutionary machinery that, when set in motion by isolation, produces these mirrored, predictable, and spectacular results? The island rule is driven by a series of interconnected forces, but the first, the most powerful, and the most transformative is the one we have touched upon in all our stories. It is the great liberation. It is the force that defines the very silence of the island. It is the creation of a predator vacuum. On the mainland, predation is not just a force. It is, for most species, the defining force of existence. It is the engine of fear. It is the great sculptor of life, the invisible hand that shapes everything, Think of the mainland mouse. Its fear of the hawk, the snake, and the owl dictates its very form. It must be small to hide. It must be fast to flee. It must be drab in color to blend in. Its senses must be tuned, not for exploration, but for high-strung paranoid vigilance. Its behavior is a life lived in the shadows, between the cracks, a frantic existence of hiding and dashing. This is the glass ceiling of fear. It is an evolutionary straitjacket that punishes with instant death any individual that dares to be different. A mouse born slightly larger is a slower, easier target. A mouse born slightly bolder is the first to be seen. A mouse born with a brighter patch of fur is a beacon for the hawk. Predation is a force of brutal, grinding conformity. It keeps the small small. But this same force also sculpts the large. The elephant's great size, its thick hide, its powerful tusks. This is armor. This is a fortress built at an immense metabolic cost for one reason: to defend against the lion, the tiger, and the saber-tooth. The predator pressure on the mainland forces the large to become larger, to become walking, unassailable fortresses. Then comes the impossible journey and the arrival on the isolated shore. The survivors, the mouse, the elephant, find themselves in a world where this all-defining 50-million-year-old war is suddenly over. The enemy is gone. The predators did not make the journey. This is the predator vacuum. It is not just a simple absence. It is the removal of the single greatest evolutionary pressure on the planet. The straitjacket is unlaced. The glass ceiling shatters. For the small mouse, this is the great liberation. The evolutionary punishment for being large is gone. For the first time, a mouse born slightly larger is not a target. It is, as we have seen, a champion. It can store more fat. It can survive the winter. The energy it once poured into a lifetime of vigilance, panic, and fleeing can now be redirected into a new revolutionary project: growth. This is the engine of gigantism. The vacuum allows it. The new island pressures, like the finite pantry, demand it. But what about the elephant? Here, the genius of the mechanism reveals itself. The elephant is also liberated. It is released from the very necessity of being a giant. The war is over, and its heavy, metabolically expensive armor is no longer needed. The predator vacuum does not force the elephant to shrink. It allows it to shrink. It removes the one great overriding evolutionary pressure, be huge to survive, which then allows the other island pressure, the finite pantry, to become the new, dominant, sculpting force. The predator vacuum is the great unlocking. It is the fundamental permission for the island rule to begin. It is the force that stops the frantic mainland clock and allows the new, slow island clock to start ticking. It is the silence that allows the dopen to become a fearless 50-pound giant. And it is the same silence that allows the elephant to lay down its heavy armor and, in an act of brilliant, pragmatic survival, become a dwarf. It is, in every sense, the beginning of the story. We have established the first great permissive force of the isolated laboratory, the predator vacuum. This is the silence that shatters the glass ceiling, the liberation that unlocks the evolutionary straitjacket. It is the force that allows the small to become large and allows the large to become small. But this liberation, this permission, is only half of the story. It is the key turning in the lock. Now, the door swings open and the new arrivals step into a world defined by the second great mechanism. This is not a force of permission. It is a force of pressure. It is the mechanism that does the actual, relentless, generation by generation sculpting. It is the stark, cold, and inescapable reality of the island pantry. On the continent, life is a frantic race, but it is a race run across a vast, seemingly infinite playing field. The pantry, while contested, is enormous. A herd of elephants facing a drought in one valley can migrate 100 miles to another. A flock of birds finding a forest's fruit crop has failed can fly to the next county. The continent is a system of checks and balances, but it is an open system. It is defined by its vastness, its interconnectedness. The island is the opposite. It is a closed system. The shoreline is not just a geographic boundary, it is the wall of the laboratory, the edge of the world. The amount of food, the amount of fresh water, the amount of simple space is all there is. It is finite, absolute, and unforgiving. There is nowhere to run. There is no migration. There is no next valley. This is the island pantry, and its limits become the new dominant evolutionary sculptor, the force that replaces the absent predator. Let us first revisit the great mainland elephant, now marooned. The predator vacuum has just liberated it from the need to be a giant. It is now free to change, and the island pantry immediately and brutally tells it why it must change. A 6-ton body is a metabolic furnace. It demands a staggering, relentless supply of fuel, hundreds of pounds of vegetation every single day. On the continent, this was a fair price to pay for the armor of size. On the island, it is a fatal luxury. The first lean season arrives. A dry spell, a cold winter. The vegetation withers. The pantry, which was perhaps sufficient in the good years, suddenly becomes terrifyingly bare. The herd begins to starve. And who is the first to die? It is the largest, most magnificent, and most fuel-hungry individual. The 6-ton patriarch, the symbol of mainland success, is the first to fall, his great furnace sputtering out for lack of fuel. And who survives? It is the genetic outlier, the runt, the slightly smaller individual, the one whose furnace runs a little cooler, the one that can survive on just a little bit less. In the closed system of the island, efficiency is no longer just an advantage. It is the only virtue that matters. This survivor passes on its genes for smallness. The next generation is on average slightly smaller. The next lean season comes and the process repeats. The large are culled. The efficient survive. The island pantry is a relentless, grinding sieve, filtering the population, generation by generation, pushing it toward a smaller, more pragmatic, more efficient form. This is the engine of dwarfism. It is not a choice, it is a mathematical, metabolic necessity. Now let us look at the small mouse, also marooned. The predator vacuum has just liberated it. The glass ceiling is gone. It is now free to grow. And the island pantry immediately tells it why it must grow. The mouse faces the exact same lean season as the elephant, but it faces a different metabolic problem. A tiny, warm-blooded body is a terrible furnace. It has no insulation. It burns fuel at a frantic rate and has almost no capacity to store it. A mainland mouse can starve to death in a matter of days. In this new predator-free world, who is the first to die in the lean season? It is the smallest, most mainland-like individual, the one whose tiny body has no reserves, the one that freezes in the cold night, the one that starves in the first 2 days without food. And who survives? It is the genetic outlier, the giant of the litter, the one that is, by chance, 10% larger. This larger mouse has more body mass. It can store more fat. It has reserves. It can survive the cold night. It can endure the week without food. This is the engine of gigantism. On the mainland, this larger mouse would have been a slow, obvious meal for a hawk, a genetic failure. But in the safety of the predator vacuum, the island pantry rewards this new size. The larger, more robust individuals are the ones who survive the inevitable, recurring bottlenecks of the closed system. The island pantry, therefore, is the great unifying mechanism. It is a two-sided coin. It punishes the inefficient wastefulness of the giant forcing it to shrink. And it punishes the inefficient fragility of the small, forcing it to grow. It is the force that pushes both from opposite ends of the spectrum toward a new, stable and efficient island-sized middle. We have now assembled the first two great mechanisms of the island laboratory. We have the predator vacuum, the profound silence that provides the permission for life to change, and we have the island pantry, the finite closed system that applies the relentless pressure for life to change, pushing both the large and the small toward a new, efficient middle ground. These two forces explain the dramatic changes in size and form that we see in our gallery of giants. But there is a third, equally powerful and perhaps more profound change that occurs. It is a change not just in the shape of the body, but in the tempo of life itself. The island, in its isolation, does not just alter the physics of the body, it alters the very rhythm of time. To understand this, we must first understand the two great strategies of life on Earth. On the mainland, in that chaotic, predator-filled, high-stakes world, the dominant strategy for most creatures is what biologists call the R strategy. This is the strategy of the field mouse, the rabbit, the insect. It is the strategy of a life lived fast, frantic, and cheap. The world is seen as a violent, unpredictable lottery. The best way to win is not to be the strongest, but to buy the most tickets. This is a life of quantity over quality. Live fast, reach adulthood in a matter of weeks, breed young, have enormous litters of offspring, pouring all your energy into creating dozens or even hundreds of potential survivors. And then die fast because you are almost certain to be eaten. Life in the R strategy is explosive, disposable, and defined by a frantic, high-speed metabolism. Now, take that R strategist mouse and place it on the isolated island. The predator vacuum has just made its life safe. The island pantry has just made its world stable and limited. In this new context, the R strategy is no longer a brilliant survival plan. It is a catastrophic failure. A mouse that breeds explosively, producing a dozen offspring every few weeks, is no longer winning the lottery. It is simply flooding its new finite pantry with competitors. It is creating a population boom that the island cannot possibly support, leading to a horrifying cycle of mass starvation and population collapse. The island environment, in its quiet stability, begins to punish this frantic mainland strategy. And it begins, generation by generation, to reward a completely different approach. It favors the opposite strategy, the strategy that biologists call the K strategy. This is the strategy of the elephant bird. It is the strategy of the giant tortoise. It is the strategy of quality over quantity. This new, slow, methodical pulse is the third great mechanism of the island. It is the slowing of the evolutionary clock itself. In this safe, stable, predator-free world, there is no longer any evolutionary advantage to living fast. The frantic, high-burn metabolism of the mainland is a wasteful, inefficient furnace. The island begins to favor individuals with a slower metabolism. The ones that burn their fuel more efficiently, the ones that can extract more energy from that finite pantry. The pulse of life begins to decelerate. With this slowing comes a cascade of beautiful, logical consequences. First, if you are not in a rush to reproduce before being eaten, you can take your time growing. The R strategist mouse must become an adult in 6 weeks. The new K strategist mouse can take 6 months or even a year. This allows evolution to build a better, more robust and larger body. The frantic rush to build a disposable creature is replaced by the slow, patient work of building a durable one. This is a crucial component of island gigantism. Life is no longer a sprint, it is a marathon. Second, if your life is slow and stable, you change your reproductive strategy. Instead of pouring your life's energy into 100 lottery ticket offspring, you now invest all of that same energy into just 1 or 2. You invest in creating a single, perfect, large, and well-developed offspring that has the absolute best chance of surviving. This is the logic that leads to the single, colossal, 2-gallon egg of the elephant bird. It is the ultimate expression of quality over quantity. And finally, if you live in a world without predators and you possess a slow, efficient, fuel-saving metabolism, a remarkable new possibility emerges: a profoundly long life. The frantic 1-year lifespan of the mainland mouse is replaced by the slow, multi-year lifespan of the giant island rodent, and in its ultimate expression, it is replaced by the century-and-a-half meditative existence of the giant tortoise. This K strategy is the logical, inevitable response to the island's stability. It is the zen of island life. It is the slowing of the heart, the breath, and the generation. And it is this profound shift in time that allows the island's creatures to become the slow, magnificent, and enduring giants that we see in our gallery. We have now explored the 3 great interconnected mechanisms that drive the island rule. We have the predator vacuum, the profound silence that provides the permission for change. We have the island pantry, the finite, closed system that applies the relentless pressure to change. And we have the slowing of life, the shift to a K strategy, which alters the very tempo of existence, allowing for the stable, patient growth of giants. We have seen in spectacular detail how these 3 forces combine to take the small, the timid, and the fast, the mouse, the pigeon, the cricket, and forge them into large, slow, fearless, and magnificent giants. But now we must turn to the other side of the mirror. We must, at last, confront the other, stranger, and perhaps even more fascinating half of J. Bristol Foster's riddle. What happens when these exact same 3 forces are applied not to a mouse, but to a monster? What happens when the creature marooned in the laboratory is already a giant, a 10-ton masterpiece of continental evolution? We must journey back in time to the Pleistocene and to the shores of the Mediterranean. The climate is shifting, the great ice sheets are advancing and retreating, and the sea level is rising and falling like a slow geologic breath. In these fluctuations, land bridges form and then they vanish. During a time of low water, a great continental giant, the straight-tusked elephant Paleoloxodon antiquus, wanders from the European mainland onto a peninsula that will, in a few thousand years, become the island of Sicily, or perhaps Malta, or Crete. This is a creature of breathtaking scale, 13 feet tall at the shoulder, a true titan of the Ice Age, larger than a modern African elephant. It is a K strategist by definition, a walking fortress of muscle and ivory. Its great size, its primary defense against the lions and saber-toothed cats of its world. Then, the waters rise. The land bridge is submerged, the herd is trapped, the laboratory is sealed, and the 3 great mechanisms begin their work. First, the predator vacuum. The elephants find themselves in a paradise of silence. The great cats, their ancient enemies, are gone. The evolutionary arms race that forced them to be 13-foot-tall fortresses is over. This is the great liberation. The necessity of being huge has just been erased. The evolutionary permission to change, to lay down that heavy, metabolically expensive armor, has been granted. Second, the island pantry. This is the pressure. The island is small, the resources are finite. The dry Mediterranean summer arrives, and the vegetation withers. The herd, with its colossal appetite, is now in a closed room, and the great culling begins. The 10-ton bulls, the symbols of mainland power, are the first to starve. Their massive bodies are furnaces that demand too much fuel. The individuals who survive this first brutal filter are the ones who, by sheer chance, are slightly smaller. The ones that are more efficient. Generation after generation, the sieve of natural selection favors only the small. The finite pantry is the sculptor, and it is chiseling away at the giant, relentlessly, pragmatically. Finally, the slowing of life. This is the most fascinating part. The elephant is already a K strategist. It lives long, breeds slow, and invests heavily in one precious calf. The island intensifies this, but it also hacks it. On the mainland, a 10-ton elephant has a gestation period of 22 months. It is a massive 2-year investment of energy. This is a slow, ponderous life cycle. But as the island pantry selects for smaller and smaller elephants, an incredible secondary advantage appears. A smaller body means a smaller, faster and cheaper pregnancy. A 5-ton elephant might carry its calf for 18 months. A 1-ton elephant, perhaps for only a year. A 300-pound elephant, perhaps even less. This is a revolutionary shift. The life clock of the species, the time from one generation to the next, accelerates. This is the genius of island dwarfism. Natural selection can now work much faster than it could on the mainland, allowing the elephant to shrink at a pace that is, in evolutionary terms, breathtakingly rapid. The result of these 3 mechanisms, working in perfect logical harmony, is Palaeoloxodon falconeri, the Sicilian dwarf elephant. It is a creature that defies our imagination. It is, in every detail, a perfect elephant. It has the trunk, the tusks, the familiar intelligent shape. But it stands only 3 feet tall at the shoulder. It weighs perhaps 300 pounds. It is an elephant the size of a goat or a large dog. This is not a degenerate creature. It is not a failure. It is perhaps the most perfect, efficient and successful elephant that has ever lived. It is a masterpiece of pragmatic adaptation, a 10-ton titan that learned the wisdom of humility and in doing so survived on its island home for hundreds of thousands of years, long after its giant ancestors on the mainland had vanished. It is the perfect mirrored masterpiece of the island rule. We have explored the machinery of the lost laboratories. We have seen how the 3 great forces, the predator vacuum, the island pantry, and the slowing of life, work in perfect logical concert. We have seen how they take the raw material of life, whether a mouse or an elephant, and sculpt it into a new form, a masterpiece of efficiency, perfectly adapted to its isolated world. The giant moa, the fearless dodo, the 3-foot-tall elephant. Each one is a stunning success story, a creature honed to perfection by its unique, predictable, and gentle environment. But here, we arrive at the great, central, and heartbreaking paradox of our story. The very same forces that make these creatures masterpieces are the exact same forces that forge their fatal, tragic flaw. The isolation that acts as a gentle, creative sanctuary is also a bubble, and the perfection it creates is a fragile, brittle perfection. The island, in its profound, ancient silence, does more than just change the bodies of its inhabitants. It changes their minds. Think of the mainland. It is a world of chaos, of betrayal, of constant shifting threats. It is a school of hard knocks. Every creature that survives there is a graduate of this brutal education. They are cynical, they are wary, they are paranoid. They are born with a deep, genetic and ancestral knowledge of malice. A deer on the continent does not need to be taught what the shadow of a wolf means. The fear is instinctive. A rabbit does not need to learn that the snap of a twig is a death knell. It is born with this terror in its bones. The island is the opposite. It is a world that has forgotten malice. The predator vacuum has created a paradise, a laboratory where for millions of years the concept of a large ground-dwelling enemy simply does not exist. The moa, the dodo, the giant weta, they did not just lose their wings, They lost their fear. This is what scientists call evolutionary naivete. The very instinct to flee, the frantic, life-saving panic that defines almost every creature on Earth, has been bred out of them. Why? Because on the island, it was a waste of energy. For millions of years, an individual moa or dodo that was, by chance, born with the high-strung, fearful instincts of its mainland ancestors, had no advantage. It was a nervous, flighty creature in a world with nothing to be nervous about. It wasted precious calories on panic, while its calmer, bolder, and more curious siblings spent that same energy on feeding and breeding. The island, in its gentle, meditative way, actively selected against fear. It favored trust. It favored curiosity. It favored a slow, calm, and fearless temperament. The result was a world of profound innocence. We see it in the accounts of the first sailors to land on Mauritius. They described the dodo not as a stupid bird, but as a fearless and curious one. Here was a 50-pound, ground-dwelling bird that had never seen a large mammal. And when a human, a new bipedal creature, walked up to it, the dodo's internal genetic rulebook had no file for terror. It had only a file for curiosity. It would, the accounts say, simply waddle up to the sailors, inspecting this new, strange arrival. It had no concept of a threat, no instinct for the malice that these new creatures brought with them. We see the same story in the bones of the moa. They were creatures built for browsing, not for running. They were giants with no concept of an enemy they could not simply ignore. This is the paradise paradox. The isolated laboratory, in its perfection, creates a creature that is too perfect. It is an organism flawlessly adapted to a set of rules that exist nowhere else in the universe. It is a key cut with divine microscopic precision to fit a single, unique lock. And as long as the laboratory remains sealed, this is the most successful creature on Earth. But the paradox is this: the very lock that it was designed for, the very isolation that created it, is also its only defense. The island is a bubble, and the evolutionary naivete of the creatures within it is its greatest vulnerability. They are masterpieces of a gentle world, with no comprehension of the violent, chaotic, and predator-filled world that exists just beyond the shore. They are, in every sense, perfect, fragile, and living in a paradise that is about to be shattered. The laboratory doors are about to be kicked open. For millions of years, the isolated laboratories of the Earth existed in a perfect, fragile equilibrium. The evolutionary clock had reset, ticking to its own slow, gentle, meditative rhythm. In these sanctuaries, life had been sculpted by the predator vacuum and the island pantry. It had become slow, it had become efficient, and it had become fearless. This was the world of the K strategy, a world of profound evolutionary naivete, a paradise that had forgotten the very concept of malice. Life was slow, life was safe, life was predictable. And then, in a geological instant, a new sound was heard on the shore. It was not the sound of a storm-tossed bird arriving by chance. It was not the sound of a floating log scraping against the reef. It was the sound of a heavy wooden hull grating against the sand. It was the sound of a language the island had never heard. It was the sound of the laboratory doors, which had remained sealed for 80 million years, being kicked open. The bubble was about to burst. The first to step ashore was a creature that had long since broken the rules of every ecosystem it inhabited. It was a creature that carried its own environment with it. It was man. And when this new bipedal predator stepped into the forest of Mauritius, it found a world that felt like a dream. It found a larder that was not only full, but seemingly grateful. This is where the paradise paradox revealed its fatal flaw. The dodo, the giant 50-pound pigeon, a creature of perfect innocence, had no file for this new arrival. Its evolutionary rulebook, written by millennia of safety, identified this new creature not as a threat, but as a curiosity. And so it waddled toward the sailors. For the men who had been at sea for months, living on salted meat and hardtack, this was a miracle. Here was a slow, heavy, fearless bird, a source of fresh meat that did not even have the sense to run away. The hunt was not a hunt. It was a simple, brutal, and tragically easy harvest. This first direct wave of predation was devastating, but it was not the true ecological bomb. The real, unmitigated catastrophe did not walk off the ship on 2 legs. It scurried off in the darkness, on 4. The ship was not just a vessel of men. It was a Trojan horse. It was a perfect, pressurized capsule of the mainland, a floating ark carrying the mainland's most aggressive, most chaotic, and most successful strategists. These were the passengers. In the dark, while the sailors slept, they slipped from the ropes and scampered onto the beach into the heart of the naive paradise. First came the rat, the black rat, a creature of frantic mainland energy, a hyper-efficient, fast-breeding, omnivorous survivor. It stepped into the Mauritian forest and found a banquet laid for a king, a banquet with no locks, no guards, and no alarms. It found the large, single eggs of the dodo, laid in crude nests on the forest floor. It found the eggs of a dozen other species of ground-nesting birds, birds that had never had to evolve a strategy for hiding their young from a small, nocturnal, egg-stealing mammal. For the rat, this was not a new world to adapt to. This was a pantry to be emptied. Then came the pigs. Sailors would intentionally release pigs onto islands as a self-sustaining food source for future visits. The pig is a living, breathing plough. It is an omnivorous excavator. It ripped through the soft forest floor, its powerful snout turning over the soil, devouring the roots, the grubs, the giant insects, and every single ground-level nest it found. And then came the creatures the sailors kept for comfort, the cats and the monkeys. The cat, a perfected 4-legged hunting machine, was released into a world filled with birds that had forgotten how to fly, or birds that nested on the ground, their evolutionary naivete a death sentence. The Paradise Paradox had collapsed. The 2 worlds, which had been separated for millions of years, had finally collided. It was not a fair fight. It was the collision of 2 different timescales. It was the slow, gentle K strategy of the island, a world that produced 1 perfect egg a year, coming face to face with the frantic, explosive R strategy of the mainland, a world where a single rat can produce a dozen young in a matter of weeks. The island's gentle, trusting inhabitants had no defense. Their perfection was their undoing. The laboratory doors were not just open. They had been torn from their hinges, and the ancient, quiet rules of the island were being rewritten in blood. The invasion had begun. The laboratory doors of Mauritius were shattered, and the ancient, quiet rules of the island were now being rewritten by the chaotic, brutal, and fast-paced logic of the mainland. At the center of this collision stood the dodo. It was the island's masterpiece, a 50-pound, flightless pigeon, a creature sculpted by millennia of perfect peace. And it was, in this new and terrible world, the most vulnerable creature on Earth. Its perfection was now its fatal flaw. The end of the dodo was not a single, dramatic event. It was not a grand battle. It was a quiet, swift, and multi-fronted unraveling. It was the death of a K strategist, a creature of slow time, overwhelmed by the frantic R strategy of the invaders. The first front was the hunt, but perhaps not in the way we imagine. While the dodo's fearlessness made it tragically easy for sailors to harvest, it was, by most accounts, not a particularly good meal. Its meat was described as tough and oily. It was a food of last resort, not a delicacy. While this direct human predation certainly took a toll, it was not the killing blow. The true executioners, the ones that tore the dodo's world apart at its very foundation, were the passengers that humans had brought with them. The dodo, as a case strategist, had a life cycle of profound, slow patience. It laid a single egg, a massive, precious investment of energy, placed in a crude, simple nest on the forest floor. For 1,000,000 years, this had been the perfect strategy. The ground was safe. There was no creature on the island that would or could steal that egg. And then the pig arrived. The pig, an omnivorous, rooting machine, ripped through the forest floor. For the pig, the dodo's nest was not a cradle, it was a simple, easy meal. It devoured the eggs, one by one, erasing an entire generation with every discovery. And then the rat arrived. The rat, a nocturnal, hyper-efficient hunter, slipped through the night, a new terror the island had never known. It was small enough to be ignored and fast enough to be unstoppable. It too found the dodo's single, undefended egg. It was a feast, a perfect calorie-rich prize. And the monkeys, which the sailors had also introduced, learned to steal the eggs from the nests as well. This was a war that the dodo could not biologically win. The dodo, with its slow K strategy, could produce, at most, one successful chick per year. The rat, with its frantic R strategy, could produce a dozen offspring in a matter of weeks. The pig, the same. The evolutionary mathematics were horrifying. The dodo's replacement rate was slow, steady, and built for a world of peace. The invader's consumption rate was exponential, frantic, and built for a world of chaos. The dodo's single precious egg stood no chance against the relentless, teeming, and ever-growing hunger of the new arrivals. The dodo population was not just being hunted, its very future was being eaten. The old birds, the adults, might have survived for a time, waddling, confused, through their new, terrifying world. But no new generation was being born. The nests were empty. The silence of the forest was no longer the silence of peace. It was the silence of extinction. The final front was the dodo's own body. It was a 50-pound bird, a giant that had been sculpted by the island pantry, a creature that depended on the rich seasonal bounty of the island's unique fruits. And now it had new competitors. The pigs, the rats, the monkeys, they too ate the fruit. They were faster, more numerous, and more aggressive. They were stripping the pantry bare. The dodo, the slow, gentle, rightful heir to the island, was now being outcompeted, starved, and its young devoured all at the same time. Its evolutionary naivete, its beautiful, gentle trust, was its death sentence. Its world, the only world it was designed for, had vanished from beneath its feet in less than a single lifetime. The end was swift, breathtakingly swift. The dodo was first described by Dutch sailors in 1598. It was a marvel, a curiosity, a strange, giant pigeon. The last widely accepted, credible sighting of a living dodo was in 1662. In just 64 years, an evolutionary masterpiece that had taken millions of years of quiet, patient, isolated evolution to build was gone. It was erased from the planet so quickly, so completely, that by the 1700s, some naturalists in Europe began to doubt it had ever existed at all, dismissing it as a sailor's myth, a dragon from an old map. It was the first and most iconic casualty of the Paradise Paradox. It was the price of naivete. The fate of the dodo was a horrifyingly swift and brutal affair. It was an ecological blitzkrieg. A gentle, naive, K-strategist world was overrun in a matter of decades by a chaotic, explosive R-strategist invasion of rats, pigs, and monkeys. The dodo was not just hunted, it was unraveled, its very foundation, its single precious egg, devoured from beneath it. Its story is an echo, a warning of what happens when the bubble of paradise is burst by the mainland world. But this echo rings out across the globe. And on the other side of the planet, in the ancient misty laboratory of New Zealand, a parallel tragedy was unfolding. It was a tragedy that was, in some ways, slower, more methodical, and even more profound. It was not just the death of a single iconic species, it was the complete and total collapse of an entire 80-million-year-old kingdom. The Laboratory of New Zealand was, as we have seen, the Republic of Birds. It was a world without mammals, a world that had found its balance in the form of the 12-foot gentle moa and the giant tiger-taloned Haast's eagle that hunted it. This was an ecosystem that had been stable for millennia, and then, just as in Mauritius, the laboratory doors were broken open. This time the invaders did not arrive on great European sailing ships. They arrived in magnificent ocean-going canoes, or waka. They were the Polynesians, the greatest navigators the world has ever known, the ancestors of the modern Maori. They arrived sometime around the year 1300. They were a different kind of invader. They were not sailors looking for a temporary stop. They were settlers. They were looking for a new home. And the home they found was unlike any other place on Earth. It was a land of mist, forest, and birdsong, and it was a land without a single native land mammal to hunt. But it was not a land without meat. As these first settlers explored their new home, they encountered a creature from a dream, a 500-pound wingless, defenseless bird that moved in slow, unwary herds, a creature that, like the dodo, possessed a profound evolutionary naivete. This was the moa. For the Maori, who were a hunter-gatherer society, this was not a curiosity. It was a miracle. It was a walking, seemingly endless, and utterly fearless supply of protein. It was the perfect prey. The hunt began. This was a new, two-legged, intelligent predator, one that hunted with spears, with fire, and with relentless, systematic cooperation. The moa's only predator for 1,000,000 years had been the Haast's eagle, a threat from the sky, a danger that was sudden and absolute, but also rare. It had no genetic defense, no instinctive fear of a predator that hunted on the ground in groups. Its naivete, the gentle trust that had been its defining feature for millions of years, was now its death sentence. The moa was, like the dodo, an easy, tragic harvest. But unlike the dodo's extinction, this was not a story of rats and pigs. While the Polynesians did bring a passenger, the Polynesian rat, or kiori, which certainly had an impact on smaller birds, the primary force of this extinction was man himself. The hunting was relentless. The moa, as a K strategist, could not possibly withstand this pressure. Its life cycle was slow. Its replacement rate was measured in years, not weeks. The Maori were simply consuming the moa, generation by generation, far faster than the giants could ever hope to reproduce. Within a few hundred years, a geological eye blink, the moa was gone. The 12-foot giant, the creature that had defined the ecosystem for millions of years, the peaceful, browsing heart of the New Zealand forest, was hunted to total extinction. The story, however, does not end there, because the moa was not alone. Its existence was the foundation for another equally magnificent giant. High in the treetops, the Haast's eagle watched. This 35-pound, tiger-taloned predator, the largest eagle the world has ever known, had a single food source. It was a specialist. It hunted only the moa. And now, in the span of just a few centuries, its entire 500-pound food supply had been systematically, completely, and permanently erased from the forest floor below. The Haast's eagle was now a king with no kingdom, a predator with no prey, a specialist with nothing to specialize in. It, too, was doomed. This is a co-extinction. It is a domino fall. The new predator, man, had arrived and killed the primary herbivore. and in doing so, man had indirectly starved the island's original apex predator. The great eagle, the shadow in the sky, a creature that had never feared anything, was now starving to death, its giant wings useless, its tiger talons grasping at empty air. It too vanished into silence. In just a few hundred years, the new arrivals had completely and irrevocably shattered the 80-million-year-old balance of the Republic of Birds. The giant browser was gone. The giant predator was gone. The laboratory was not just broken into. Its greatest, most spectacular creations had been burned to the ground. The story of the lost laboratories, as we have told it so far, is a story of profound and sudden tragedy. It is an echo of silence. The laboratories of Mauritius and New Zealand, once vibrant with the footfalls of 50-pound pigeons and 12-foot giants, were shattered. The Paradise Paradox, that fatal flaw of evolutionary naivete, seems to be a universal death sentence. The dodo, the moa, the Haast's eagle, the elephant bird, all were masterpieces sculpted by a gentle, isolated world, and all were erased in a geological instant when that world was broken open. Their silence is a void. It is a story of loss, a gallery of ghosts. But our journey is not quite over, because some of the giants are still with us. There are laboratories that were breached, yet their greatest creations endured. They are the living ghosts. They are the survivors, the holdouts, the evolutionary anomalies that saw the great invasion of the mainland, and somehow weathered the storm. We can, today, still stand in the presence of the island rule. We can look into the ancient reptilian eye of a giant tortoise. We can feel the palpable, heavy presence of a 300-pound komodo dragon. This presents us with the final and perhaps most important riddle. Why them? Why did the dodo, the moa, and the elephant bird, all magnificent, successful strategists, fall so quickly, while the tortoise and the dragon survived? They too were isolated. They too were sculpted by the island rule. What made them different? Was it luck? Or was there something in their design or in the nature of their laboratories that gave them a defense the others lacked? We must first look at the dragon. The komodo dragon is, today, a living, breathing giant. It survived the arrival of early humans, the arrival of Dutch colonists, and the arrival of modern tourism. Why? The answer is simple, and it is brutal. The komodo dragon was not the dodo. It was not a gentle, naive, fearless herbivore. It was not a creature of innocence. The komodo dragon was a giant that evolved as an apex predator. It was sculpted not by peace, but by the violence of hunting other giants. When man arrived on the island of Flores, he did not find a creature that waddled up to him in curiosity. He found a 10-foot, 300-pound, armored, and venomous carnivore. He found a living dragon. The komodo dragon did not suffer from the Paradise Paradox. It met the new two-legged invader not as a victim, but as a competitor. It is a creature of malice, a creature of patience, a creature to be feared. Humans did not and could not harvest the komodo dragon in the same way they harvested the dodo. You cannot walk into a forest and casually harvest a creature that can kill you with a single septic bite and then patiently wait for you to die. The dragon survived, in part because it was already a monster. It was a giant that commanded respect, a creature whose own biology was a profound and effective defense. But this only solves half the riddle. What about the gentle? What about the slow? What about the giant tortoise? The tortoises of the Galápagos and Aldabra were, in almost every way, just like the dodo. They were slow, gentle, herbivorous giants. They were the ultimate expression of evolutionary naivete. They had no fear of man. And they were hunted, devastatingly so. When the great sailing ships, the whalers and the buccaneers, found these remote archipelagos, they did not find a competitor. They found the perfect living pantry. A tortoise was a 500-pound walking castle of meat. But its true miracle was not its shell, it was its slow metabolism. Sailors could capture the tortoises, stack them by the dozens, alive in the dark, hot holds of their ships. And the tortoises would simply wait. They would live for a year or more, with no food or water. They were the perfect, self-preserving, fresh food source for a long ocean voyage. The harvest was apocalyptic. Hundreds of thousands of tortoises were taken from the islands. They should be extinct. They were just as naive and far more useful than the dodo. So why are they still here? They survived, not because of their own nature, but because of the nature of their laboratories. Mauritius and New Zealand were paradises. They were lush, fertile, well-watered and perfect for human settlement. When humans arrived, they stayed, and when they stayed, they brought their passengers with them, the rats, the pigs, the cats, the goats, the strategists that tore the naive ecosystem apart at its roots. Now look at the Galápagos. They are not a paradise. They are a volcanic hellscape, a landscape of black, jagged, waterless rock, baking under an equatorial sun. Look at Aldabra. It is a remote, razor-sharp coral atoll with almost no fresh water. These laboratories survived because they were inhospitable. Whalers stopped there, they harvested the tortoises, and then they left. They could not stay, they could not settle, and because they did not settle, their passengers, the rats and pigs, never gained the same catastrophic, overwhelming foothold that they did in Mauritius. The giant tortoise, this living ghost, survived the Great Invasion by a miracle of geography. It was saved by the very harshness of its own prison. The laboratory that had forged it, a laboratory of rock and drought and scarcity, was its own final and greatest defense. It was a home too forbidding for the ultimate invader to ever truly conquer. We have walked the path of the island giants to its two branching ends. We have seen the living ghosts, the survivors like the dragon and the tortoise, who cling to their harsh, inhospitable laboratories, a living testament to luck and geography. And we have stood in the silence of the broken laboratories. We have felt the profound, sudden emptiness of Mauritius and New Zealand, worlds where the paradise paradox led to a swift, catastrophic, and total collapse. The dodo is gone, the moa is gone, the elephant bird is gone. Their worlds, their 80-million-year-old kingdoms, are now silent. The great, slow pulse of the moa's footfall no longer shakes the forest floor. The cry of the Haast's eagle no longer echoes from the mountaintops. The slow, gentle browsing of the dodo has ceased. What then is left? We are left with the echoes. We are left with their bones. We are left with sub-fossilized eggs, heavy as cannonballs, and hooked beaks, and giant, tiger-like talons preserved in ancient caves. It is easy to look at these remains as we would look at any other fossil, as a simple record of a dead animal, a curiosity, a data point in the long, cold ledger of extinction. But the fossils of the island giants are something more. They are not just the record of a creature, they are the record of a world. To stand before the towering 12-foot skeleton of a giant moa is not to look at a failed experiment. It is to look at a profound success. You are looking at a silent stone monument to a world that worked, a world that was stable, balanced, and perfect for 80 million years. You are looking at the physical proof of a different now, a parallel time stream that ran on a different evolutionary clock, a clock that ticked to a slow, gentle K-strategy rhythm, a clock that had no need for the frantic, paranoid R-strategy of the continents. The bones of the dodo are not the bones of a stupid bird. They are the bones of a creature of perfect trust, a creature sculpted by a world without malice, a world that we, in our cynical mainland evolved minds, can barely even comprehend. These echoes are the physical evidence of evolution's boundless and sometimes whimsical imagination. The continents, with their vast, interconnected and predator-filled landscapes, force life into a certain predictable set of solutions. The mainland is a world of conformity. The islands are the what-if. They are the dream journals of a sleeping planet. They are the answer to the question, what if there were no predators? The answer, a bird can become a cow. They are the answer to, what if the only rule was efficiency? The answer, an elephant can become a goat. They are the answer to, what if a pigeon never had to be afraid? The answer, it can become a 50-pound, fearless, trusting giant. The echoes of these lost worlds remind us that the rules of life, as we know them, are not the only rules. They are just the local bylaws of our particular laboratory. The universe of biological possibility is far wider, far stranger, and far more beautiful than the single, frantic reality we inhabit. To feel this echo is to feel a profound, strange, and specific melancholy. It is not just the sadness of death. It is the sadness of a beautiful, quiet, and ancient song being drowned out, mid-verse, by a sudden, chaotic, and meaningless noise. It is the sorrow of a story that was interrupted. These bones are the ghosts of a different time, a different logic, and they are whispering a warning. They are whispering that the most perfect, the most stable, the most ancient, and the most successful worlds can also be the most fragile. They are whispering that perfection, when it is too specialized, is a bubble, and that bubbles, when they meet the harsh, unpredictable reality of an outside world, are destined to burst. And in this great branching story of life, this leads us to one final and most unsettling echo, a discovery that suggests this strange island logic may not be limited to birds and elephants. It may, in fact, have applied to us. The echoes of the lost worlds, as we have heard them, are profound. They are the stories of birds, reptiles, and insects, all sculpted by the strange, logical, and separate physics of the island laboratories. We listen to these stories, and we feel a sense of melancholy, of wonder, but also, perhaps, a sense of distance. We see these creatures, the moa, the dodo, the dwarf elephant, as fascinating others. They are animals, lessons in biology that we as human observers can study from a safe remove. We are the audience watching a play about a strange and distant land. But what if we are not the audience? What if we too are part of the play? This is the final and most unsettling echo. It is a discovery that takes the island rule with all its strange, transformative power and points it directly at us. For this, we must return one last time to the rugged, volcanic island of Flores in Indonesia. We know this island as the home of the komodo dragon, the living reptilian giant that evolved to hunt the island's now extinct dwarf elephants. It is a perfect textbook example of the island rule at work, a giant predator evolving to hunt a giant-turned-dwarf. But in 2003, in a cool limestone cave named Liang Bua, a team of archaeologists found something that did not fit. They were digging through the layers of the cave floor, reading the history of the island backward when they found a skeleton. It was not a stegodon. It was not a giant tortoise. It was, unmistakably, a hominid. It was a member of the human family. But it was like no human they had ever seen. The skeleton was that of a fully grown adult female, but she stood only 3.5 feet tall. She was a bipedal, tool-making creature, but her proportions were all wrong. She had strangely large feet and a skull that held a brain no larger than that of a modern chimpanzee. It was a creature from a myth. It was, as it was quickly nicknamed by the stunned scientists, a hobbit. The scientific world was thrown into chaos. What was this? The first, most skeptical reaction was that this was not a new species at all. This was a modern Homo sapiens, like us, but one that had suffered from a terrible disease. Perhaps it was a case of microcephaly, a condition that results in a small brain, or a severe form of dwarfism. But as the scientists looked closer, this simple explanation began to fall apart. The bones were not just a scaled-down version of our own. The wrist bones were primitive, more like an ancient ape's. The skull shape, though tiny, was not that of a diseased human, but something else entirely, something ancient. And then the most profound hypothesis was put forward. This was not a diseased modern human. This was a different species of human. This was Homo floresiensis, and the explanation for its tiny 3-foot-tall stature and its tiny chimpanzee-sized brain was not disease. It was the island rule. The theory is this. Long ago, perhaps a million years before these bones were laid down, an ancient, larger human ancestor made the impossible journey. It was likely Homo erectus, an upright, intelligent, 6-foot-tall toolmaker, a successful explorer that had already conquered much of Asia. A small founding group of these adventurers, by some unimaginable twist of fate, became marooned on the island of Flores. The laboratory doors slammed shut, the clock was reset, and the 3 great mechanisms began their work. First, the predator vacuum, or in this case, a different predator. The hominids had to contend with the komodo dragon, but the island pantry was, as always, the dominant force. A 6-foot-tall Homo erectus is a metabolically expensive creature, and its most expensive, most fuel-hungry, most calorically demanding organ is its enormous, complex brain. On the mainland, this brain was the ultimate survival tool. It allowed them to outthink, outplan, and out-cooperate every other creature. But on the small, limited pantry of Flores, was this giant brain a luxury? Was it a high-maintenance engine that the island's resources simply could not afford to fuel? The same relentless, pragmatic sieve that selected against the large body of the elephant now, it seems, selected against the large brain of the human. The island rule, in its brutal efficiency, favored the individuals who were smaller, more efficient, more pragmatic. Generation by generation, the giant Homo erectus was sculpted down. The body shrank. The brain shrank. This is the most humbling, most profound, and most challenging echo of all. It suggests that our most cherished attribute, our intelligence, our consciousness, the very thing we define as human, is not the inevitable pinnacle of evolution. It is a luxury. It is a metabolically expensive feature that in a world of finite limits can be and was surrendered. The Hobbit of Flores is the ultimate proof that the island rule is a universal law of biology. We are not separate from it. We are not its masters. We too are subject to the same profound ecological forces that shape the dwarf elephant and the giant pigeon. We are not just the audience, we are part of the story. The discovery of Homo floresiensis leaves us in a profound and perhaps uncomfortable silence. It is the final echo, the one that resonates most deeply because it is a story about us. It is the ultimate what if. What if our greatest strength, our intellect, was not a destiny but a biological luxury, a fuel-hungry engine that could be surrendered in the name of efficiency? The Hobbit of Flores is the final, irrefutable proof that islands are not just isolated laboratories. They are not just sanctuaries or prisons. They are, in a very real sense, alternate realities. If continental evolution is the great, roaring, chaotic river of life, the one that flows in a single, mighty channel toward the present day, then the islands are the small, quiet streams that branched off millennia ago to find their own, separate and secret paths to the sea. They are the B-sides of evolution. They are the deleted scenes from the great movie of life. They are the blueprints of time. A blueprint is a drawing of a possibility. It is a plan for what could be. The mainland world, the one we inhabit, is the final, noisy, chaotic construction site, the one single version of the building that, by sheer violent chance, managed to get built. But the islands, in their quiet isolation, kept the other blueprints safe. They show us the other versions of the building that could have been, and to study them is to feel a profound sense of wonder and a deep humility, because they show us, in no uncertain terms, that the world as we know it, the world of mammals, of predators, of fear, of intelligence, was not an inevitability. It was not a grand final design. It was just one blueprint among thousands. The ancient mammal-free laboratory of New Zealand is the blueprint for a world that answered the question, what if the age of dinosaurs never truly ended? What if the birds, not the mammals, had been the ones to inherit the Earth? The result, a republic of birds, a land of 12-foot giants and their tiger-taloned eagle hunters. The Laboratory of Mauritius is the blueprint for a world that answered the question, what if fear was not a necessary ingredient for survival? The result, the dodo, a 50-pound creature of perfect evolutionary trust. The Laboratory of the Mediterranean, which held the dwarf elephants, is the blueprint for a world that answered, what if efficiency, not power, was the only virtue? The result, a 3-foot-tall, perfect elephant, a masterpiece of pragmatic humility. And the Laboratory of Flores, with its hobbit, is the most challenging blueprint of all. It answers the question, what if the human mind was not the pinnacle, but just a costly, negotiable tool? The result, a tiny, small-brained and perfectly successful human who survived for 1 million years. These lost worlds are the only glimpses we will ever get into the other dreams of our planet. They are the planet's what-if scenarios, played out in flesh and bone. They show us that evolution has no goal. It is not striving to create us. It is not a ladder climbing relentlessly toward intelligence and complexity. It is instead a branching, chaotic, and endlessly creative process. A process that seeks not perfection, but only sufficiency. It seeks, simply, what works in a given context. And on the islands, the context was different. The rules were different. And so the answers were different. These echoes of lost worlds are the most valuable things we have. They are the counter-argument to our own evolutionary arrogance. They are the quiet, fossilized whispers that tell us that this, our world of speed, of fear, of frantic strategy, of digital noise, is not the only way to be. It is just the blueprint that, for now, has won. To look at the bone of a moa or the egg of an elephant bird is to look at a ghost in the machine of evolution. It is a faint, beautiful, and slightly sad reminder of a different path, a different time, a different song. It is the quiet, meditative music of a world that, for a few glorious, silent millennia, found another way to live. We have been on a long journey, a journey of the mind, looking down. We have been peering into the small, secret laboratories of the Earth, the isolated fragments of rock and soil that float in the blue of the ocean. We have called the great land masses, Africa, Asia, the Americas, the mainland. We have seen them as the great, chaotic, noisy centers of evolution, the strategy world of predators and arms races. And we have seen the islands as the quiet, separate strategy sanctuaries, the small what-if scenarios. But now, our journey requires us to do one last thing. It requires us to change our perspective. It requires us to stop looking down and to start looking back. In the 1960s, at the very same time that J. Bristol Foster was piecing together the island rule by looking at the bones of mice and elephants, humanity was embarking on its greatest journey of exploration. We were leaving our cradle, and from the sterile, silent dust of the moon, the Apollo astronauts turned their cameras around, and they showed us our home. This is the Great Moonshot Effect, the overview effect. It is the sudden, profound, and life-altering cognitive shift that happens when you see, for the first time, the laboratory that you yourself inhabit. From the 250,000-mile distance of the moon, the mainland vanishes. There is no Africa. There is no Asia. There are no borders, no nations, no chaotic, separate continents. There is only one single, beautiful, and terrifying object. It is a blue marble, a sphere of impossible color, swirling with clouds, suspended in the most profound, most absolute, and most infinite ocean we have ever known, the sterile, black vacuum of space. In that moment, we finally see the truth. The Earth is not the mainland. The Earth is an island. It is the ultimate isolated laboratory. It is a single, solitary, continental fragment, not adrift in the Pacific, but adrift in the cosmos. And if Earth is an island, then the island rule in its perfect, relentless logic must apply. We must at last apply the three great mechanisms to ourselves. First, the ocean of space. The isolation is so profound, so complete, it is almost impossible to comprehend. We spoke of the silence of arrival, the 1,000,000,000 chance of a bird crossing the sea. What are the odds of life crossing the light years? The silence of our arrival is, as far as we know, total. We are, for now, completely, utterly, and perfectly alone. Second, the predator vacuum. This too is absolute. In a biological sense, we have no predators. We have evolved in a laboratory with no external competing intelligence, no mainland of galactic competitors. We are, in every sense of the word, the undisputed masters of our laboratory. And finally, the island pantry. This is the most terrifying realization of all. Our pantry is finite. The thin, fragile film of atmosphere that we breathe. The thin, delicate crust of topsoil that feeds us. The closed, perfect hydrological cycle that gives us water. It is all we have. There is no next valley. There is no migration. There is no escape. The shoreline of our island is the edge of the atmosphere. We are, all of us, inhabitants of a closed system. And what has this ultimate isolated laboratory produced? It has produced us. We are the dodo. We are the moa. We are the hobbit. We are the ultimate K-strategist, a creature of profound intelligence, a species sculpted by this very specific, very unique, and very gentle bubble of isolation. And here we must face the paradise paradox on a planetary scale. Like the dodo, we have evolved a profound evolutionary naivete. Because our pantry seemed infinite, we have evolved with no instinctive check on our own, explosive R-strategy behavior. We are a K-strategy creature, slow-breeding, intelligent, complex, that is behaving like a frantic mainland rat. We are consuming our finite pantry with the explosive, chaotic hunger of an invasive species. The inhabitants of Mauritius and New Zealand were destroyed when an outside invader breached their laboratory. Our paradox is different. Our paradox is worse. On the cosmic island of Earth, we are the dodo and we are the rat. We are the naive, specialized, K-strategy inhabitant, and we are also the invasive, R-strategy, mainland plague, tearing our own home apart. We are the giant, walking, evolutionary contradiction, and the silence we hear from the cosmos is the same, profound evolutionary silence that the dodo heard just before the doors of its laboratory were kicked in. We have arrived at the final great and terrible realization. We have seen our planet, our home, for what it is. A single, blue, and profoundly isolated laboratory, adrift in a sterile cosmic ocean. And we have seen ourselves in the mirror. We are the ultimate paradox, the K strategist with the R strategy appetite, the dodo and the rat, the mower and the invader. We are the naive, specialized, long-lived inhabitants of a paradise, and we are also the chaotic, explosive, invasive plague that is tearing that paradise apart at its roots. This is the great defining philosophy of our own isolation, and it is built upon two concepts: uniqueness and fragility. First, let us consider our uniqueness. What is humanity's great defining evolutionary trait? What is our 12-foot stature, our 50-pound fearlessness, our venomous bite? It is our mind. It is our consciousness. This is the most metabolically expensive, the most luxurious, the most improbable organ in the history of life on this island. The human brain, which makes up only 2% of our body weight, consumes over 20% of our energy. It is a biological furnace. It is a roaring, demanding, high-cost engine. How could such a thing possibly evolve? It could only have evolved in the perfect, stable and gentle conditions of a K-strategy laboratory. It could only have happened in a predator vacuum. Our intelligence is not the product of a frantic continental arms race. It is the product of profound safety. It is the ultimate luxury, the ultimate what-if experiment, created by an island that was safe enough and stable enough for millions of years to allow a humble ape to divert its precious energy away from muscle and speed, and to pour it extravagantly into thought. Our consciousness is the moa's height. It is the dodo's innocence. It is the ultimate evolutionary specialization, a trait of breathtaking, beautiful and specific genius, born of a total isolation from any external cosmic competitor. We are in every sense the ultimate island giant. We are the specialized K-strategy masterpiece of the cosmic island. And this leads us, in a perfect, tragic circle, to our fragility. This is the paradise paradox played out on a planetary scale. The dodo's specialization was its fearlessness. It was a trait perfectly adapted to its laboratory and utterly fatal when that laboratory was breached. Our specialization is our intellect, and it too seems to contain the seeds of its own destruction. Because what has this magnificent K-strategy brain done? It has, for the first time in the history of the planet, given a K-strategy creature the tools of an R-strategy plague. Our intelligence did not just give us art and music and philosophy. It gave us agriculture. It gave us medicine. It gave us industry. It gave us the ability to, temporarily, break the rules of our own island pantry. A lion population is held in check by the number of antelope. A dodo population was held in check by the seasonal fall of fruit. Our population, for the last 10,000 years, has been held in check by nothing. Our R-strategy mind has allowed us to behave like an invasive species, consuming the finite resources of our closed system. The fossil fuels, the ancient forests, the topsoil, the oceans, with an exponential, frantic and chaotic hunger. We are the dodo that has learned to build a chainsaw. We are the mower that has learned to use fire. And this is our unique evolutionary naivete. It is not the gentle, trusting innocence of the dodo. It is a naivete born of something far more dangerous: arrogance. It is the core, unshakable belief that we alone are not subject to the island rule. We believe in our bones that our pantry is infinite. We believe that our laboratory is not a closed system. We believe that our intelligence, the very tool that is causing the problem, will be the thing that saves us from it. We believe that we are the one species in 4 billion years of Earth's history that can, somehow, escape the mathematical, metabolic, and ecological laws that govern all other life. This is our fearlessness. This is our fatal flaw. The philosophy of our isolation is this: we are a creature whose K-strategy uniqueness gave it the R-strategy power to destroy its own K-strategy home. We are the ultimate self-consuming paradox. We are the snake and the mouse. We are the eagle and the mower. We are the invader, and we are the naive, specialized giant, all trapped in the same body, on the same beautiful and finite blue shore. And so, we find ourselves here. At the end of our long journey, we have turned the lens from the distant, misty shores of the past, and we have pointed it, finally, at ourselves. We have found our place in the gallery of giants, and it is the most uncomfortable and the most challenging place of all. We are the masterpiece of the cosmic island, a creature of profound K-strategy intelligence, and we are the invasive R-strategy plague, tearing our own laboratory apart. We are the dodo, sculpted by peace, and we are the rat, arriving in the dark to devour the eggs. This realization is the heavy, silent legacy of our journey tonight. It is a profound and perhaps unsettling thought to carry with us into the quiet of the night. What then do we do with this knowledge? The dodo left a legacy of silence, a warning of the price of naivete. The mower left a legacy of co-extinction, a warning of how quickly a perfect ancient world can be unraveled. What will our legacy be? Because this is where our story diverges from all the others. This is the one single, profound difference that separates us from every other creature in the great lost gallery. The dodo did not know it was naive. The mower did not know its world was fragile. The dwarf elephant did not know it was the product of a finite pantry. They were masterpieces of evolutionary instinct, but they were unconscious masterpieces. They were living, breathing, but unknowing actors in a play they could not comprehend. We are the first and only giant in the history of our island that has been given the mirror. We are the only inhabitant of the laboratory that has, at last, become aware of the laboratory's walls. We are the dodo that knows the rat is coming. We are the mower that knows the hunter is on the shore. We are the Homo floresiensis that knows its brain is a luxury and its pantry is finite. This is the true double-edged sword of our K-strategy consciousness. Our magnificent, fuel-hungry brain is what gave us the R-strategy tools to create this paradox. It gave us the fire, the agriculture, the industry, the relentless, chaotic hunger that now threatens to consume our own nest. But this same brain, this same consciousness, is the only thing in the known universe that can solve it. The dodo's naivete was biological. It was an instinct carved in its genes. It could not, in a million years, have learned to fear the rat. Our naivete is behavioral. It is a choice. We are not the dodo. We are only acting like the dodo. We are, with full knowledge of the finite pantry, with full knowledge of the fragility of our world, choosing to waddle fearlessly toward our own self-destruction, driven by the R-strategy hunger we refuse to master. This, then, is the responsibility in the mirror. As you lie here in the profound K-strategy quiet of the night, letting your own high-strung R-strategy world of the daytime fade away, you are left with this one simple truth. Our intellect is not just a tool for consumption, it is a tool for stewardship. Our consciousness is not just an engine for creating problems, it is the only engine capable of creating solutions. The legacy of the giants is not just a story of loss, it is a profound and very personal question. It is the mirror held up to us in the quiet of the night, and it asks, will we be the last naive giant of the cosmic island, a creature so intelligent it managed to engineer its own extinction, a creature that knew the rules but chose to ignore them? Or will we be the first and only inhabitant of any island in the history of life to finally understand the rules of the laboratory, and with wisdom, with patience, and with the true, long-term, K-strategy thinking of a true giant, choose to live within them? This is the legacy of the night. This is the responsibility we carry. To be the conscious K-strategist, to be the shepherd of our own beautiful and fragile laboratory, to be the giant that at last learned to be wise. Our journey tonight is now complete. We have travelled from the mist-covered ancient forests of New Zealand to the harsh volcanic shores of the Galápagos. We have walked in the silent, heavy footsteps of the elephant bird and felt the innocent, tragic curiosity of the dodo. We have stood in the shadow of giants and in the shadow of dwarfs. We have pulled back the curtain on the lost laboratories of the earth and found the simple, elegant, and powerful mechanisms that sculpted these magnificent, isolated worlds. The silence of the predator vacuum, the pressure of the island pantry, and the profound, gentle slowing of the K-strategy of life. We have seen the paradise paradox, the tragic, fatal flaw of evolutionary naivete that led to the silence of the moa and the dodo. And finally, we have journeyed home. We have looked back from the cold, quiet distance of space and seen our own beautiful, blue home for what it is, the ultimate isolated laboratory, the cosmic island. We have found ourselves in the mirror and seen the great living paradox of our own existence, the conscious K-strategy giant behaving with the frantic R-strategy hunger of an invasive rat. And we are left, at the end of all things, with that quiet, profound responsibility, the responsibility to be the one giant that finally learned to be wise. This is a heavy thought, a great weight to carry. But now, at the end of our journey, it is time to set that weight down. The questions of the day, the challenges of our waking world, the profound responsibility of our species, these are tasks for the sun. The night is not for solving. The night is not for striving. The night is for release. It is time now to let these thoughts go. Let them drift like spores on the high wind, out into the quiet darkness. Feel the weight of your body, heavy, supported, and safe. Feel the gentle K-strategy rhythm of your own breath, the slow meditative pulse that has been with you your entire life. This is the ancient quiet engine of your own laboratory, a body and a mind perfectly adapted, a miracle of 1 billion years of evolution, now at rest. You are in this moment in your own perfect sanctuary. You are in your own safe, isolated island of calm. The chaotic mainland world of the day, with its frantic R-strategy pace, its noise and its demands, cannot touch you here. You have turned off the lights. You have silenced the phone. You have, just for now, sealed the laboratory doors. The ocean of the night is all around you, a vast, protective and silent moat. There are no predators here. There is no pantry to worry about. There is only the profound biological vacuum of the night. And in this silence, in this safety, you can feel the evolutionary clock of your own body begin to slow. The pulse of your mind, your metabolism, is decelerating. The frantic thoughts of the day are giving way to the slower, gentler, and more abstract thoughts of the night. This is the great nightly shift. We are, all of us, every evening, retreating from the mainland of the day to the isolated island of our own sleep. We are leaving the world of doing and drifting into the world of being. So let your mind drift. Let it become a voyager on the dark, quiet ocean of the night. Imagine the silence of New Zealand before the first canoe touched its shore, the profound, green, 80-million-year-old quiet of the Republic of Birds. Imagine the slow, meditative, 100-year pulse of the giant tortoise, a living castle at peace in its harsh, volcanic home. Imagine the blue, swirling, silent beauty of the earth itself, a single, perfect, living jewel hanging in the infinite velvet darkness of space. This is the silence of the cosmic island. It is the silence of your room. It is the silence of your own slowing mind. You are safe, you are at peace, and it is time now for the giant to rest. Good night.